Hi. Quick announcement before I start the show. This episode of Select and Start was co-edited by my fellow Moonshot creator, Riley Hopkins. Normally I edit every episode myself, but things have been super busy lately, so this one was a tag team effort between me and Riley. I'm super grateful for their help. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to get this episode out in a timely manner. Thanks again, Riley. I really appreciate it. A link to their actual play podcast, Riley Hopkins and Their Amazing Friends, has been included in the description of this episode. All right, I think that's it. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to Select and Start, the podcast about meaningful and memorable video games. I'm your host, Keifer, and every episode I bring on a guest who selects a game that made an impact on their life. I have a wonderful guest joining me today. He's a writer for supercombo.gg as well as a video gaming essayist. It's IdolismJ. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Keifer. Thanks for having me on.
Happy to have you on. This is a great time to talk about a genre that I don't get to cover enough, weirdly, but I wanted to dedicate a month to it this particular month. Fighting Game February, talking about a much more specific thing for a podcast that has yet to cover Street Fighter, but we'll get to that shortly. I want the listeners to get to know you a bit, Jay. What do you do and what do you like?
The best way I think I could describe it is one time my friend said he's gone triple platinum in a couple different places. So it kind of depends on where you know me from. As you mentioned, I write for Super Combo. I do YouTube video essay stuff, but more pertinently to this conversation, I've been someone who plays fighting games competitively for well over a decade at this point. And that was the primary brunt of my time in gaming. I still do a lot of other stuff, but so much focus was spent on being someone who does competition, but then also spinning that into doing years and years of broadcast, event organization. And I kind of made my B-grade celebrity status, if you will, off of being a tournament organizer for a very popular but sadly short-lived, thank you COVID, tournament series called Michigan Masters.
You know, very storied background there in terms of the fighting game scene, but you're also somebody who enjoys retro games among other obscurities in the medium. So I wanted to take the time at the top of the show before we get into fighting games specifically to get to know your video game background, as it were. No community likes to gatekeep more than the gamers, so we're going to have to check your gaming credentials here. Let's talk a bit about your gaming history here, Jay. Who or what got you into it, your relationship with it throughout the years, so on and so forth. What is your portrait of a gamer?
So I started gaming in 1994. I was 4 years old, and the neighbors across the street brought over in a brown paper Kroger bag their NES and NES game collection because they had had the SNES for long enough that they weren't playing it anymore. Mm-hmm. And they gave that to me, and it's been downhill ever since. That pretty much top three most foundational moments of my life because I never looked back after that. I thought video gaming was simply the greatest thing on earth. I stuck with Nintendo products as well as I could. I didn't get the Super Nintendo at the time, but this puts me directly in the age of person who unwraps an N64 at Christmas in 1998. And then I take a pretty direct pivot to become the biggest Dreamcast fanboy known to mankind. As I get older, the money starts becoming a bit more suitable, so I just stock up on the Dreamcast, PS2, GameCube, all the Nintendo handhelds, PSP. Love the PSP so much. We were talking about it the other day in one of our chats, but you got to live through the time where Tetsuya Mizuguchi put Lumines on the PSP and Meteos on the DS. What a time to be alive. So a lot of my stuff stays with retro gaming, mainly because the PS360 era was dog shit. And I'll never let anyone live that down, because now younger people come through and they're like, oh yeah, I have so much remembrance, so it's fun for the PS3 and 360. I'm like, y'all weren't there. That was terrible time for video gaming. That sucked so badly. I think it's very interesting. It's one of my favorite times in terms of interest and figuring out what's going on, but it was an awful time. And modern games just don't they don't speak to me very much. I think that they have lost a ton of artistic value. They just don't do as much. And the more and more we get removed from those days, and the more and more gaming looks to be really, really just corporate greed and bad decision making. Goddamn, do NES games and PS2 games look real good.
That's also an interesting thing where there's also like this sliding scale of where retro begins and ends, because like it's 2025 when we're recording this episode, and like, you know, retro in our minds is 20 years ago. But the problem is people forget what 20 years ago is now. So that was squarely 2005, the end of the PS2, GameCube, Xbox generation. And that's starting to transition because the Xbox 360 comes out at the end of 2005, I think.
Yeah, like we are right on the 20-year mark of the 360.
Yeah, that's, ooh, boy, awesome.
My beard hairs which little beard hairs I have are going gray, and I don't like it. I'm getting old, Keifer.
That means like next year, Gears of War becomes a retro game.
Yeah,
fun.
I will always hold standard definition as retro, high definition as modern.
Okay,
I don't think there's going to be a point where we get past that, and I have many defendable reasons why.
I think it's like also like medium thing too, with like retro isn't really a thing that we use to describe, say, film, right? There's distinct eras. We have silent and then it's the talkie era, and then terms within terms, Hays Code stuff, post Hays Code, New Hollywood, all this stuff. So I think, and like video games being a technology has sort of like this generational cadence to it, but we definitely have like these discrete eras and movements within things, and like what is like the defining texts that define like the generation or whatever. Like that, I do think that there is also like just this very clear delineation between like standard definition and high definition.
Yeah, 4:3 versus 16:9. It's a difference. It's always going to be a difference.
Yeah, I mean, Dead Rising, which I guess is also turning 20 years next.
Ow.
You know, I talked about that a few episodes ago, and one of the big things with that is when people were buying it, because it was shortly after the 360 had came out, people were complaining about how it looked and how they couldn't read certain things on the screen because
couldn't read the text. Yeah, I had that problem because my friend bought it, brought it over, we hooked up to my CRT, and the text was unreadable, like just about as unreadable as it could get, because it just wasn't made for CRTs anymore.
It was incompatible with an age. Let's move forward or backwards a little bit there. You said that the PSP, the Dreamcast, those are consoles that you love. Do you have a particular favorite console?
It's Dreamcast. It's Dreamcast all day. I plan on getting the Dreamcast swirl in the blue and the orange tattooed on my wrists the second I have a long enough break in my manual labor job to like have tattoos heal on my working arms.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had that plan for ages. I love the Dreamcast. It's always going to be my favorite.
It's just gonna be funny if you have to call out of work for 2 days and they're like, "Why?" It's like a Dreamcast.
Yeah, I had the tattoo like 2 years ago. I think I had the tattoos planned, and then like I had to work late both days, and I had to cancel because I'm on a job site, and like I don't leave until the job's done, and so I was like, wow, blew it twice, and then I had to go on vacation where I would be swimming, and my wife's like, don't get the tattoos. If you're gonna want to swim with me. So I'm still planning on it, but it's just always like I have money to spend elsewhere instead of inking my body.
Right. Because when I reached out to you to get on the show, you threw out, I think about 5 or 6 games. 2 of them were Dreamcast games. One of them was Skies of Arcadia, and the other one was Jet Set Radio, which I'd covered in the first year of the show, because a lot of people now they like the Dreamcast, right? But then maybe 3.
Yeah, Jet Set Radio is one of those games that's going to live forever, and Skies of Arcadia is my favorite game of all time. With a bullet, it's just that's always going to be number one.
Yeah.
I think it's just one of the most impactful JRPGs I could ever play. It does kind of live and die by the time it was released in as a almost countercultural piece to the current culture, being post Final Fantasy VII, like darkness, edginess. Complexity, highly emotional stories, whereas Skies of Arcadia goes with a more simpler route, but is so wholly based around the idea of what if we nailed every minor detail in this game. It is simply amazing to play. I think if you ever complain that it's too simple, you are correct in doing so, but the amount of love that went into that game comes through in pretty much every single part of it. It was made by some of the best to ever do it, and I will never, ever stop thinking about that game. It rewired my DNA at a time where I still could have that imprinted.
You're making me think back now on the games that one of my older brothers would play a lot, and I would watch him play, but I didn't play much myself. Skies of Arcadia was one of those, and I'm thinking about it was the GameCube version. Also watched him play the GameCube version of Tales of Symphonia and Dragon Quest VIII on PlayStation 2, and it's like in my mind there's like two sections of JRPG from that era, or at least that's how I separated them in my mind as a kid. Now I obviously think about these things with much more nuance, but I was like, there's Japanese RPGs, the Dragon Questy kind that don't mind being Japanese, and then there's the Final Fantasy type of RPG where it's like this is being more international, I guess, because like the Final Fantasy games that were coming out then, where it's like I watched my brother play like 10-2 and 12, which felt a lot more, hey America, we like your stuff too. And Dragon Quest VIII was a much more simple RPG, but just a really long, simple thing, whereas like a lot of these were much more blockbustery on the Final Fantasy side of things.
It's funny because your truncation of that is like quite accurate. They are the two movers and shakers within the genre for a reason, and they have many people who follow behind them. But like, if you want to trace a path of what damage Final Fantasy and what damage Dragon Quest did to everyone's brains, like you can easily find those lines. So you're really not wrong making those comparisons.
Right. It's just like these things was like, I can tell that this was made by a Japanese company because my older brother told me like why Kingdom Hearts was so weird, right? When you're 6, you're like, that's Goofy. Goofy's my boy. I mean, like I don't know adult stuff yet, so it's normal to see Goofy, but I'm just sort of like being guided along by this brother that's like 9 years older than me, and he's just like explaining the world to me through games like it's like Musashi or something like that on the GameCube or PS2. Just these something Musashi.
Yeah, Brave Fencer Musashi sequel on the PS2 that nobody likes.
Yeah. He didn't seem to like it much either, but it's like
nobody liked
to
that
me.
game.
I was like, oh well, it looks like Mega Man Legends, and that's a game that you and I and nobody else knows, right? Yeah. Point is, it's a very interesting era where it felt like everything was new and exciting and could be anything, and it didn't take 6 years for anything to come out. And definitely there's like pros and cons to every era in gaming. Certainly it is easier than ever to release a video game or to start releasing video games. But it is also a time where it's much more visibly cynical than it's ever been.
Yeah. I say it's easy enough in theory to release a video game. In practicality, good lord.
We're at the mercy of power. What can we say? Talking a bit more about your gaming taste and the things that shaped your taste, like you're talking about like Lumines and these Dreamcast games.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get into fighting games, are there any other like big impactful games that have sort of like defined like what you look for in a game as you've grown into an adult?
It probably would be those two that you mentioned. I became a Tetsuya Mizuguchi sick in the head person around that time because both Lumines and Meteos were so good, and I had already played Space Channel 5. I wasn't really following the creator at that point. You know, auteur theory, many people work on these things, but
right.
Mizuguchi is obviously, he has such a heavy hand in his games that it's almost impossible to not give him so much credit because they are so indelibly him at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But I love a good audio-visual puzzler. I think you can draw a line from like Space Channel 5, Meteos, Lumines. Lumines is, again, like top 5 favorite game of mine. You can draw that to Huniepop, which is another like top 5 favorite video game of mine. I love to match some threes. I love to flick some blocks. And I love a really well curated and considered audio-visual identity that goes with those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the audio-visual identity of Huniepop is certainly a thing. Yeah,
I love that game. I love that game so much. I'll defend that game to my grave.
No. Listen, it's like I hear people who I like and respect just say like, you got to check out Huniepop, and I look at the Steam store page and I'm like, is there more than one?
Yeah, there's a much softer touch after you get past like the first 30 minutes of that game where it's like, we're a crude dude boner comedy, and then we're actually not.
Right. I believe you. I want to try it. I do want to try it. I know I'm a number sicko and will love it, but it is a thing where there is like a big ol' asterisk for the normies.
Yeah, it's a little hard to recommend, but if you give it a shot and you go in with the knowledge that, yes, this is an eroge, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a little shock jock, and there is kind of something wrong with that, but it will pay off at the end. It's a really, really wonderful game. there's like an alpha mode, they call it, where you do like 100 levels of constantly increasing difficulty, and I did all 100. I couldn't stop playing the game, and that's after like the 5th time I beat it or something. They eventually introduced it. I've played that game so many times. It's like my go-to relaxation game.
Yeah. It's the first time it's been mentioned on the show, so I just wanted to point it out, not to debated, call you out.
No, I debated like sending that in, and I was like, let's leave the eroge somewhere else. We'll go with something a bit sicker in the head without boobs.
I'm trying to like reconcile that, because like it is a reasonable concern, and it is like, do I do a select and start after dark? What would I do about that?
Yeah, it's
because like it is an aspect of this medium that this interactive quality to it that has made like a genre that I've gestured at but never fully talked about. But like this is like a game that's a lot more mechanically deep than the rest of the genre.
Yeah, and you've seen a couple of my videos. I talk about eroge with some frequency. And part of that is, I'm like in my mid-30s. If it's going to have porn, I don't care. I'm not like blushing at it. But the more you dig into eroge, the more you realize like how gigantic and foundational of a genre of video game it is, in a way that we could never know or see in America, because we are culturally so different. It could never be released here. And there's obviously just mountains of trash, just absolute garbage. But that 2024 video, like I would not stop talking about Dokusei. Like that game is unbelievable. And the remake of it specifically is given so much love and care, and has such an unbelievably soft touch when it comes to talking and characters, and you feel like you could live inside that world forever. And the moments that do get pornographic, there's a chance it rips you out of that, but usually it's done with such tastefulness that you just realize like it's like a movie that has a sex scene. Like, what is truly the difference? If you're being careful about it, if you're being mature about it, if you're saying something with it, if you're actually doing something with the concept of putting in like 18 plus content, then what is truly the issue? But that's a bridge you have to get over. And I don't blame anyone for getting over that, because there's a very good chance you get over that and you step directly into something garbage.
Right. It's about it's not a thing where you can just like walk blindly to with an open mind. You kind of have to like get a little bit of guidance.
You have to be guided.
Yeah.
You definitely have to be guided, because I'll make enemies now. Like a lot of the foundational visual novels that America may think of, like Clannad or Tsukihime, I've played those. They are dog shit. I hate them. I cannot stand those games.
Look, I love a hot take. We've talked. You've made your point that eroge is a legitimate genre. You just have to know where to look, and also like, hey, these foundational texts, fuck them.
Yeah, hate them. Actively, or I'm glad I played them for saying so. God, I hated Tsukihime. Still not done with it, but I hated it. And Clannad sucks also. Clannad totally sucks.
Fuck modern games. Fuck Clannad. That's the vibe we're bringing into this episode, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have no horse in the Clannad game. Let's pivot now to the fighting game scene, because this is a big part of your identity, your presence to people, both online and in person. What got you into fighting games?
So I come from a hockey family. I'm from Michigan, the barrier of the Great White North before you hit Canada, and we're all hockey people up here. So I grew up in hockey arenas, and in the 90s, hockey arenas doubled as arcades. Almost all hockey arenas would have a separate arcade room. Some of them, like the Ann Arbor Ice Cube, would have absolutely gigantic arcade areas. They'd be just monstrous. And so I have a great fondness for all things arcade era, but especially by, like mid 90s, it was trailing off a little bit. I loved fighting games. I could not get enough of arcade fighting games. I thought they were the best things ever. There was one ice arena that only had 2 cabinets. That's the only 2 games they had, but it was Darkstalkers 1 and Street Fighter 2 World Warrior. And that's all I could ever need. That's 2 fantastic arcade fighting games right there. So that really stuck with me for so long. I loved them. I loved playing them. I just love the idea of competition in that sense. And then I started playing Third Strike at high school, and I started playing Guilty Gear X2 in high school. And I linked up with someone who was a friend of a friend in the night school classes, and he was actually someone who was a competitive Third Strike player. And so I learned Third Strike at his place, and that kind of prepped me for the big bomb drop that was Street Fighter IV in 2009. That is where the second giant onboarding of people into the fighting game community happens. We were derogatorily known as 09ers back then. You're like, oh, here come the 09ers, here come the kids. But nowadays, if you're an 09er, like, you're older than the OGs who were there to make fun of the 09ers are. Like, if you're still been around since 09, you're old as dirt. Like, you've been around for ages.
Yeah, you'll be retro in a few years.
Oh God, no. Gray hairs. So I got my start with Street Fighter 4 competitively. I joined the scene fully. I would travel out and compete. Street Fighter 4 sucks ass. That game completely blows.
Do you like any video games?
No, I hate.
I like Street Fighter 4. Come on.
Street Fighter 4 sucks. Like, okay, I'll explain it this way. Street Fighter 4 is great when you know 0 to about 74% of that game at a competitive level. When you know 75 to 100% of that game at a competitive level, it sucks. That is like a game that's really fun to play, but playing it at the highest competitive level completely blows. I hate playing that game competitively, but I'll be down to clown somewhat casually if we are just like at a party drunk, like pull out the sticks. But like, man, entering a tournament for that game, never again.
I think it's fun, but I'm also like the most casual fighting game player in the world. So it's
you haven't been hit with like a beefy 4-layer OS and been like, okay, what do I do about this?
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
So ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss. Yeah, that's exactly. Like, Street Fighter 4 is a fine game, but like, it's all the stuff that gets real under the sheets that makes that game. I hate it. I hate it so much. That game is like just so absolutely bad.
Flash kick. That's what I think about that. Guile's my friend. Vega's my friend. Cammy, also my friend.
I hate Cammy so much. Street Fighter 4 Cammy, like, I hate that character. Diabolically bad. Diabolically good character. I hate her to death.
It's like this thing where it's like, I played this game when I was a teenager, and I'm like, my thoughts on it are like, wow, Seth is a very hard character, and doesn't go much deeper than that, I guess.
Well, you were right with that one.
Yeah. So don't love Street Fighter 4. What would you say are like your fighting games, like your little roster?
Yeah, so after Street Fighter 4 was winding down, when you got to Street Fighter 4 Ultra, like, I hate Street Fighter 4, but it was so big. It took up the entire room. They're like, it's what you're playing. There was a era called Big 2. There was like a New York weekly. The big two games were Street Fighter 4 and Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So it's like, if you weren't playing those two games, you were kind of second-class citizens. And by the time Street Fighter 4 was in its like twilight years, then a lot of the other games started to come out with relative success. So the next two games that would come out in 2013 and 2014 were Guilty Gear Xrd and Undernight Inbirth. And those are my games. I've been playing those games constantly. Those are my ride or dies for the rest of my life.
Real quick question. How did you feel about Marvel 3?
Marvel 3 is fine. I like Marvel 3 a lot. It's actually probably like within the top 3 best spectator games ever made. I've always been kind of notoriously bad at versus games. They've never gelled with me. I've never sat down to like really, really get good at them competitively speaking, but Marvel 3 is amazing. Marvel 3 is just an absolutely fantastic game. I will probably watch that game the rest of my life because a high level Marvel 3 hits so different. There's nothing else like it.
Right, because I also played a lot of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, specifically Ultimate. Like it was that, and wow, like besides like the Smash Brothers games, maybe those are the two, Street Fighter 4 and Marvel 3, the fighting games I've spent the most time on, because that's when I was a teenager, and it's like you come home, you have a friend over, what do? We have a controller, boom, 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 Phoenix Wright, Rocket Raccoon, Strider Hiryu, why not? Let's have a fight. But you mentioned Undernight Inbirth, which wasn't one of the games that you threw out when you were talking about coming on the show. So like what are your feelings on Undernight Inbirth? Because this isn't one I know very well, even culturally.
It's the original game made by the company French Bread, and French Bread is more known for being the people that make the Melty Blood games, which are the Tsukihime fighting games.
Mm-hmm.
So they got a chance to make their own original game, which is kind of like this weird mishmash of like Melty plus maybe King of Fighters as an anime game. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's just so unique mechanically. And I love that game because I picked a really good character and I've slopped my way to victory more times than I should ever have done so in tournament. It's consistently been my like game that I have performed the best in. Like by the time we get to like 2019, I am considered a decent threat in this game. I have placed highly at tournaments. I took 17th at Frosty Faustings 2019 and I took 96th at Evo 2019, which is really good considering that that's still the biggest Undernight tournament that's ever happened with 1,100 people.
Mm-hmm.
So like that was my big year. It's a game that makes you think so differently because defense is absolutely crazy. Like putting someone in a block string is not good. You want to be constantly trying to like outthink them on defense because it's very advantageous to sit and down back in Undernight because you are rewarded for it so nicely. So you have to think about the ways you handle aggression and pressure differently because you're not locking your opponent down with that much advantage. You're actually giving them resources the more that you sit there and let them be in defense as you try to pressure them kind of blindly. And the character I play is just it is like the ultimate no-brain slop factory. Like I've stopped training this game ages ago. I learned some new combo routes here and there. I stay up to date for it, but like I just play by feel now because he's so sloppy. I've never felt more connected with a character than with Merkava in Undernight.
Mm-hmm.
He fits my playstyle to the T, and I just fraud people out like the scumbag that I am.
Wow. Like this fighting game thing, like it's something I'm not even adjacent to. Like it's something I'm aware of. It's something that I appreciate. I had a lot of friends who talked about Evo a lot on my like internet chat room days as a teenager on video game forums, but it wasn't something that I participated in too much. But I literally saw Evo get big with these people who were just really into Street Fighter 4, and then as Marvel vs. Capcom 3 became popular. And that is, you are right, around the time that these things just sort of exponentially grow. Because I'm thinking about like so many different fighting games are coming out in like the 2010s with different visual styles and stuff that has been like more low key is, you know, at least getting a presence. Like it was, you know, stuff like Tatsunoko versus Capcom and like that was like an obscure thing relatively, but then people are talking up and can't stop talking about things like Skullgirls in like what, 2012, 2013?
Yeah, 2011, 2012, I think was the first big wave of Skullgirls. The thing that also helps greatly is that Street Fighter V came out. That game sucked ass.
Mm-hmm.
That, like Street Fighter V for the first year, maybe 2 years, blew. It was like legitimately, not me just being a hater, but like legitimately a bad game.
No, that one I'm aware of like was not received well. I remember like the reaction to that in Tekken Cross Street Fighter was pretty muted.
Yeah, Tekken Cross Street Fighter, once it got to its second version, that game became a good game, but the first version of that game stank to high heaven. Like that came out of the gate not so hot. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite has always been a good game, but like it is a game filled with about as much fan distrust and bad feel as possible.
Interesting, because that's one I also like heard like, fuck this one. That's like the one I always hear.
Yeah, it's because like as a fighting game in wireframe, it's a good game, but as an actual fighting game that like tells you to like love it for what it is visually and like presentation wise and like care and you know the reasons you can find yourself being attached to fighting games, man, right. It does none of that.
It offers you nothing like visually or emotionally because I mean
there's no emotional touch to Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite the way you kind of need. But like the actual game that is there is pretty good. Like it's a perfectly fine game.
Right. But there's like, that's like really during a ramp up of the Disney Marvel stuff where they're deliberately like trying to lower the stock on say X-Men characters.
Yep.
Which is, X-Men is just baked into the language of video games to me. I don't want to go on this rant too long. I already did a whole, you know, X-Men Origins Wolverine episode plus a bonus episode on Patreon talking about like how important X-Men is to the fabric of the video game medium. So we're just going to move on. What do you look for in a good fighting game? What matters to you?
Expression. It is the primary thing of that makes fighting games special is how do I express myself as a competitor? And a fighting game that is open-ended enough that allows me to play a character with a play style that is so strictly different than how another person could play that character makes for a fighting game that could be played forever for me. I don't like it when fighting games become if-then statements, and a lot of fighting games at like high level can become a bit if-then statement-y. That's a bit of a like unfair truncation and boiling down of all the different decision making that goes into competitive fighting games. But man, when a game gives you the freedom to approach situations and set traps and play mind games with your opponent, it's intoxicating because it never ends. You never feel like it's ever solved. You feel like you're constantly evolving, and that level of expression, there's nothing else like it. There's absolutely nothing else like it.
No, absolutely. Here's the thing, right? It's an interactive medium, and you put it very beautifully with the expression stuff. It's the people that make a fighting game. It's not simply the game itself speaking on its own. Otherwise, we could just turn computer versus computer on and call it a day and then just take the human element out of it. But there's a psychology. It's the same reason why we watch sports, even though like the game rules are pretty, well, the NBA is always changing rules and stuff, right? But like you want to see how certain players move, and like you want to see how there's just so many variables within a fixed system. Again, asterisk, but that's what makes the game dynamic. And you want to see that be able to be expressed in a video game setting too, for it to really flourish. Otherwise, you're just watching like a glorified rock, paper, scissors tournament. And why make it more complex than that? It's the people that really make the game. It's why Evo has grown so much. It's why the Daigo moments and stuff that people have been watching on the internet for 20 years resonate. It's just like this you're seeing a human expression, like something really magical happen in front of you.
Yeah, it can't be replicated any other way. It is all what you see on screen is a byproduct of the people who are playing it. And that is fascinating enough. But when you are actually one of the people playing it, you are having a conversation with the person next to you, and there's no words being exchanged.
Yeah.
When I feel like I know my opponent, there's nothing else in video gaming that compares to that.
Yeah. I was listening to when doing like research for this episode, I like to listen to podcasts about the game I'm talking about to make sure I'm not overlapping too much. But like one thing that stuck with me when I was listening to the Wizard and the Bruiser episode on Guilty Gear is when they were talking about the integration of
rollback netcode
into the game that we're going to be talking about today, in the other Guilty Gear games. And that being like a big deal because like fighting games have always been about like the in-person, like the closeness of the person with it. And like in certain regions, particularly in say Japan, where it's a cluster of islands geographically close to each other in a way that America is so vast and big, where internet connection matters a bit less. So like the concerns of like international online fighting games is a bit less prioritized there, allegedly.
No, it's definite. Don't worry.
Yeah, I don't want to speak too definitively on a country I know nothing about culturally, right?
They've been shafting us for like a million years, and it's only been recently that they've decided to maybe start putting in good netcode.
Yeah, but like, good netcode coming in and everything like that. That's like definitely like informed by like the pandemic. And like that, you look at these things, and it's like after lockdown or during lockdown when a lot of these changes are being integrated. It's sad that it took like us having to be isolated from each other to truly appreciate the dynamic of the in the moment experience. The seeing a person like tilt right in front of your eyes because you're driving them up a wall, or the positive experiences where you're like two people like enter a flow state, like end of the movie Challenger style, where it's like it becomes a song and dance, and it's like wordless, but like you just sort of lock in with another person. It's just it's just a very fun thing to watch, even if you can't necessarily join in at the same skill level.
Yeah, it's what makes this so different. Is this is a one-on-one thing. And so many games are team focused. So there's no distraction between that song that two people are singing.
Yeah. So that's a good time to transition into the fighting game that you possibly feel the closest to, Guilty Gear Xrd.
I love this game so much, Keifer. I am going to play it until my hands fall off. I don't know if there will ever be a point in my life where I'm not playing this game. As long as there are other humans who still want to play this game, I will continue playing this game.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's ever going to be a point where I'm done with it.
Let's talk about that. But before we talk about your relationship with it, let's give a little bit of background on the game itself. And this is going to be very funny, and you're free. Please feel free to interject at any time. I try and give an intro to lead into these games, but this is again, I'm a very casual fighting game fan, and this is my first time playing a Guilty Gear game. This is going to be very funny to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be very silly for anybody who does care about fighting games for me to try and talk about them, because it's literally I'm born yesterday in this series. Guilty Gear Xrd is a games developed by Arc System Works, a Japanese video game company known for their 2D fighting game franchises such as Guilty Gear and BlazBlue. It is pronounced BlazBlue, correct?
Yes, it is pronounced BlazBlue.
Yes, it is not spelled BlazBlue.
No, it's not.
But as someone who's been vaguely aware of this series since one of them was announced to be ported to the 3DS, and I was like, what's that about? And then finally figured out how to pronounce it this week. Arc Systems also develops licensed-based fighting games such as Dragon Ball FighterZ, which I have played the hell out of, Persona 4 Arena, and Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. This is the first Arc Sys game I've covered on the show. The Guilty Gear franchise is the brainchild of Daisuke Ishiwatari. In addition to being a video game developer, Daisuke is an illustrator and musician. He is not just the creator and designer of Guilty Gear, but also the main writer and composer. Like you mentioned, Alterra Theory.
He is the most he is maybe the single, get the fuck out of here, Kojima. Daisuke is Guilty Gear in a way that no video game creator could ever be their game. When you are you want to talk about a conversation, when you are playing Guilty Gear, you are talking directly to Daisuke Ishiwatari, and there's no gap between that.
There are solo developers that put less of themselves into their games, as this developer does, working with a team of, admittedly, not too many people, but it is definitely this is this guy's brainworms, and he's rallying people to see his vision through. And that's not to dismiss the work of the people who worked on this, as we'll get to in a moment, but he remains the main creative force of this series to this day. This series was made from his brain and his notes that he brought to ArcSys, and it has since maintained that vision very much comes through today. He is an avid fan of rock and metal music, it being the dominant sound of the franchise. So intense is his love of rock that the characters and their moves are allusions to famous musicians and their music. Let's just take the most straightforward example here at the top. Daisuke's favorite band is Queen. When I was a teenager, my favorite band was Queen too, and they're still very high up there for me. That's the band that got me into music. The protagonist of Guilty Gear is Soul Bad Guy. Amazing name.
So cool. He's
Soul
so cool.
Bad Guy's real name is Frederick Bulsara. The frontman of Queen, Freddie Mercury's birth name was Farouk Bulsara. And one of Freddie's nicknames was Mr. Bad Guy. Soul Bad Guy wears a red headband with the words "Rock You" etched in it, whatever that's a reference to. And his character profile in-game for Guilty Gear Xrd lists his hobbies as listening to Queen, and his likes as his sheer heart attack record by Queen. He's not even hiding it. It's just out there.
It's Soul Bad Guy is literally Daisuke's OC, Do Not Steal, where he combines Terry Bogard with Freddie Mercury.
He used to voice Soul Bad Guy until the 2007.
Yeah, it was. I think it was. There's nothing more Daisuke than Soul Bad Guy. He just put himself in the coolest. All of Guilty Gear is Daisuke saying, "What's the coolest thing I know? I'm going to put that in my game." And the main character is here's Terry Bogard, the coolest fighting game character ever created, and Freddie Mercury, and I'm going to make them kiss. And now I've made Soul Bad Guy.
Soul Bad Guy is a Homestar Runner ass name, and I love it.
Oh, he's so cool. Soul Bad Guy is so fucking cool. The next 2 hours of this podcast are me just gonna be oh, it's so cool.
He's fucking cool. It's I saw Sonic the Hedgehog 3 last week, and I didn't like the first two Sonic movies, but I was you know what? Sonic Adventure 2 is in my DNA. I gotta see this movie. And then I fucking watched it. I just came out, I was like, man, Shadow the Hedgehog's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about Soul Bad Guy. Soul Bad Guy's so fucking cool.
He's so fucking cool.
This game does sound, and I know Sega used to publish these games, but the soundscape, the music that Daisuke makes, it sounds like Sega music, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I can see the line you're drawing there. It's very Sega arcadey guitar driven hard rock excitement music in that line.
It's the kind of thing that I feel I would hear at a late 90s arcade if somebody's playing on a Sega machine.
Yeah, it's funny because back when Guilty Gear was being published by Sega, that's when the game sounded like its most staticky and trashiest because the audio wasn't there yet. But after the Sega Sammy deal that went down, then starting with like Guilty Gear X2, just literally the greatest soundtrack ever made, and it sounds delicious.
Yeah, so Guilty Gear Xrd is the 5th main installment of the Guilty Gear franchise. The first game being Guilty Gear, the second one being Guilty Gear X, the third one, X2, and then the fourth, 2, Overture. And the first 3 games, all fighting games, fourth one, a fucking MOBA, which is impressive because it is a MOBA that predates both Brutal Legend and League of Legends. So Daisuke just has like...
He was cooking.
Was he having like a Dota hyperfixation at the time? I don't know, but like it's just so crazy that like if you want to play this game series and like absorb the story the way that like this guy was like cooking it up, it's like you just randomly have to play a MOBA game in the middle of it.
And I should mention, Guilty Gear has always been very story heavy. Like fighting games in general have always been story light. It's kind of just like characters and like a couple characteristics, and then you go to arcade mode and you just smash action figures together until you get a cutscene at the end. Guilty Gear has story, like capital S story. It's one of the biggest parts of the game.
Yeah, I thought like when I was doing the Tekken episode a couple of years ago, like I was like, man, there's a lot of Tekken story here. When I started doing my research for this episode, I was like, what the fuck, man?
There's so much story.
It is a lot. We're gonna get there. So again, so this is the 5th installment of a series, and this was developed to be like a new entry point into the series, which I wouldn't have known that unless I read it. But
it's not.
I feel like I walked in on the middle of something, both mechanically and like narratively. I didn't feel invited, but I appreciate the intention, I guess. Like I like the thing is I really like this game. I do really like this game. My things that are like being a little like flippant are me actually being complimentary. I hope that doesn't come across as mean to the listeners. So the title Guilty Gear Xrd technically refers to 3 different releases. The first one being Guilty Gear Xrd Sign. The follow-ups Revelator and Rev 2 are separate releases, but contain all of the content of the first release, Sign, plus what the new ones add. If that's confusing to you, just think Street Fighter 2, like Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo. They're both Street Fighter 2. One just has more Street Fighter 2 in it than the other one.
Yeah, they're all basically balance update and content increases. You know, it's following very much in the same Street Fighter 2 line, the way fighting games were in those days.
There's a Kit Kat bar and then there's a king size Kit Kat bar. It's just more Kit Kat bar guys.
Trust me, like there's 5 different versions of Guilty Gear X2.
Yeah, that was like blowing my mind. Like there was more versions of X2 coming out after Guilty Gear 2 came out.
Damn Skippy.
Wild. So for all intents and purposes, we're just going to refer to this as Guilty Gear Xrd, and it'll just be all inclusive as a title.
Yeah. If we're referring to anything in these days, it's pretty much going to be Rev 2 because that's the final version.
Yeah. So development of Guilty Gear Xrd was from 2011 to 2013 by a team of 25 people codenamed Team Red. Because of money and time constraints, the team opted to streamline things as much as possible because they would be able to expand on what they made after the initial release, hence 2 other Xrds coming out. This informed their choice in using Unreal Engine 3, as well as starting with a small roster of characters, just 15 at launch with 2 DLC characters. Character popularity, gameplay variety, balance, and story role informed which characters would go on to make it into the initial roster. Guilty Gear traditionally used 2D sprites, save for Guilty Gear 2, the MOBA one that used 3D models. But Xrd uses 3D cel-shaded models while keeping it as a 2D fighter. The developers use different rendering methods to make the 3D models look like hand-drawn anime characters, such as having characters shaders ignore environmental lighting to hide the polygonal composition. So it's just this really like brilliant like synthesis and ideas of like, let's make it look 2D and anime-y, but these are 3D models, and it looks really beautiful.
It is simply the most beautiful looking video game I've ever seen in my life, and I hold to that to this day. It is the pinnacle of video game visuals.
Yeah, it won best looking video game at Giant Bomb in 2014. Understandably so. It's like nothing quite looked like this, and that was all intentional. It's like if we just like narrow our scope on this and just really focus on making like this game start small and then expand after it comes out, we can just really build on the visuals of this thing. And it really paid off because, again, this game looks wonderful. As we mentioned earlier, Daisuke Ishiwatari is the main brainchild of this series, and this game is no exception to that. He did the music. He's the director. He is also the co-writer. Takashi Yamanaka is the other credited scenario writer. Daisuke Ishiwatari is the lead composer, but Norichika Sato and Shunsuke Takizawa are also credited composers here. And Hidehiko Sakamura is the game's art director. The story of this game is presented in a frankly bonkers way. And again, I'm not trying to be mean. It's just like I kind of respect at how you have to do a lot to get it. The story mode begins in arcade mode, where you play through each character's storylines individually, like you would experience a story mode through, say, a Tekken. But there's also a non-interactive story mode in which you experience back-to-back cutscenes told in 9 chapters plus 3 additional after stories. And there is no gameplay in between these cutscenes. It is functionally a really long movie.
I think at some point they did upload these to YouTube. Like they uploaded them because it's just a movie.
Yeah, because Guilty Gear Xrd came out in 2021, I think. And it's like, well, we got to get you all ready for that. Here's this, and I kid you not, listener, 6 hours and 23 minutes to watch all of these cutscenes in their entirety. It's a lot. I'm going to be honest, I did not watch all of it. I started chapter 1. I was like, man, this is going for a while. And I looked at it, I was like, I need to get my hands on the game a bit more. I'm going to focus my time on that.
It's okay. I never finished the story mode because at this point I had access to like online, so I could play more than engage with the story. But like, you could watch all 6 hours and still be like, that's cool. I still didn't get anything.
Yeah. Look, that's sort of like a there if you want it thing. And if you want it, that's great, because I can see why someone would want as much of this as possible, because it rips and there's nothing quite like it, even though it is very obvious with what influences it's taking from. Like, it's influenced by the manga series Bastard, and people who are into anime could definitely point at this and be like, JoJo's. But there's just like this weird, like, specific kind of like brainworms that Daisuke has that feels like very singular in how he's getting his ideas across, and what he's using like his like adolescent brain to communicate about his feelings about like war. But yes, and speaking of this game's stories, I'm not gonna like try and do my usual like explanation of the narrative so much as give a brief background on what the fuck this game series is kind of about, which is in 1999, humanity discovered magic and used it to solve the world's energy crisis. And then the UN outlawed science and technology for its role in polluting the world. Over time, though, it turns out it wasn't the technology and the science that was the problem. It was humanity. So the magic intended to usher in world peace was eventually repurposed into tools of war, so it goes. This resulted in the creation of gears, artificial creatures made of magic who develop wills of their own and rebel against mankind, kicking off a century-long war on humanity. Humanity eventually emerged victorious in the Crusades like the cockroaches we are, but the threats of instability continue to loom in the shadows, thus beginning the events of this game. On October 21st, 2187, Rom Lethal Valentine declares war on the entire world. Shenanigans ensue. So, Guilty Gear Xrd first released in 2014 as Guilty Gear Xrd Sign. Other games released in 2014 include Alien Isolation, Bayonetta 2, Dark Souls 2, Destiny, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Dragon Age Inquisition, Mario Kart 8, Shovel Knight, Sunset Overdrive, Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS, Titanfall, and, sorry to tell you this, Jay, to Ultra Street Fighter 4, and Octodad Dadliest Catch, which I previously covered on the show with fellow Moonshot creator Emma Shannon, who does the show Unnatural Selection. I know that you are more of a retro game guy, but did you play any of the games I just mentioned?
Dark Souls 2 sucks. That's the one that stuck out to me.
No Bayonetta 2?
No, I never got around to Bayonetta 2 because I never finished Bayonetta. The game seems fun, but I never got around to it. Smash for 3DS and Wii U is fine, but I never could get into Smash because if it's a fighting game, I have to get into it, and I just don't have the gumption for that for Smash.
Sure.
Ultra Street Fighter 4 sucks. It's fine. It's what we have. It's one of the better versions of that game. It's just Street Fighter 4 at that point is so bloated, and I hate it.
I like my Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I'll say that.
I bought that and never got around to playing it.
I like Donkey Kong. He's a monkey. He wears
I've
a tie.
heard
He's
Tropical
great.
Freeze is fantastic. I've just never sat down with the game.
Hey, if you like music, that music's got some fucking music in it. I'll tell you what. So, Guilty Gear, lots of these games. A lot of people tend to gravitate towards, Strive, or like that's the one that people know about more than any of them. What ultimately made you decide on Guilty Gear Xrd? Like, how are you connected to that game?
Okay, so we're gonna have to like set the foundation for a while here, because Xrd was like one of the most important things to ever happen during its time. So I got into Guilty Gear with X2 on the PS2, which was as you mentioned, the continuation of X. Those are like delineated as separate series, but really like X goes directly into X2. There's like 3 versions of X, but there's 5 versions of X2, but those games share like all the same backgrounds, same character sprites. It's really just kind of like a coat of paint. Outside of like the first Guilty Gear, which has been kind of retroactively dubbed Missing Link, Guilty Gear as you know it starts with X, evolves through X 1.5 and X whatever the other names are, and gets to X2. X2 is so fucking cool. It is like X2 is where Guilty Gear becomes the Guilty Gear that you know and love. It's such an unbelievably fucking cool game. All the music has finally hit like its peak audio quality. It's probably the best soundtrack ever, just because they've been building on everything for so long. And then you have multiple versions of X too. So you have X2, you have Slash, you have Reload, and you have Accent Core. And then the Sega Sammy situation goes down. And I can't remember all the details of this, but Sega and Sammy have some sort of kerfluffle. And in that spat, I believe the rights to Guilty Gear go to Sammy. And there's a time where Guilty Gear starts putting out games that are kind of dog. So you get Guilty Gear Dust Strikers for the DS, which I bought a DS for because it's Guilty Gear. But that game completely sucks. Like, it's just that's not me being a hater because I don't like the game competitively. That's just that game sucks. You get Guilty Gear Judgment on the PSP, which rules because it's Guilty Gear Reload, Guilty Gear X2 Reload, and it's a beat 'em up using the Guilty Gear sprites. So that game whips. That game's so cool because you could play Guilty Gear on the go, and you could just play a beat 'em up with the Guilty Gear characters.
That's GG on the go.
Yeah, but at this time is where you get BlazBlue, because if memory serves me correctly, the rights for Guilty Gear were kind of just like in the air. It was like unknown what's going on with Guilty Gear. So BlazBlue, through happenstance or not, becomes the sister series. And BlazBlue is fine. I like BlazBlue enough, but I never clicked with it super big back in the day. I think the game's good. I just never took it to heart the same way I did Guilty Gear.
Daisuke also does the music for BlazBlue, as I understand it.
And BlazBlue, again, like all-timer soundtrack. I think that first, like, it's hard to say that first BlazBlue Chrono Trigger. No, not Chrono Trigger. Calamity Trigger. Sorry, I had to think of something even more tuny because it's like Calamity Trigger, Continuum Shift. I can't even think of the tuny names for the rest of them at the time. But Calamity Trigger was the first one, and that game actually sucks mad ass, but I love it. Like, that game is like busted, but it's fantastic. The soundtrack you did for that is 10 out of 10. You're rarely going to find a soundtrack better than the Calamity Trigger soundtrack, and all those songs carry on throughout BlazBlue. But there was this huge lull of like, so what's going on with Guilty Gear? And the trailer for Guilty Gear Xrd drops, and I don't know how to impress the seismic, like, calamity level event that was the drop of this trailer, because it starts off with Sol and Kai talking to each other, and they're arguing because they're obviously gay lovers. It's never been more clear in your life. And it cuts to like them on a background, and they're moving, and you're like, oh my god, look at that. They're like 3D models. They look beautiful. What's going on? And they both backdash. They both do their 5H, and it clashes, and the camera does a 360 around them. And it's just like pants drop. Oh my god, is that even possible? This was like a level of technology that was, at the time, no one could have invented this. No, this was like beyond people's dreams. Because when fighting games go to 3D, they look like Street Fighter 4. They look different. Street Fighter 4 doesn't look like Third Strike, and it doesn't look like Alpha, and it doesn't look like 2. It's its own visual identity because it has to be. They just had to like make the models for the characters that look like, Ryu and Zangief and Guile, but they're not moving like they used to all the time.
Right.
But Xrd, this is like games since Xrd, like DBFZ and BlazBlue and DNF have all used the same visual style to better and like more impressive effects. But the reason why I'll always default to Xrd as the most beautiful looking game ever is because it made all of the exact same sprites from Guilty Gear X and X2 happen in 3D, like perfectly accurate. There was no compromise. They're all 3D models, but when you do one of the attacks that you've known for the past decade of your life in Xrd, it still looks the exact same. It's just a 3D model now. And like that is unspeakably complicated to pull that off. It is unthinkable that was even something that could happen.
It's like not the first, but it feels seismic in like the promise or 3D or the potential of 3D was like games look better now. But that wasn't necessarily the case because it's like, okay, we have a mastery over pixel art and now we're making this transition into 3D and it's new technology and it's exciting technology. And it is this thing where people are more excited in the initial early 3D days to play a 3D game because it feels newer than a pixel game. But there was just more polish in a thing that was more established in this new Wild West thing. People were more excited for Castlevania 64 than they were for Symphony of the Night, even though Symphony of the Night was ultimately the better game. But that's the 2D pixely one, and that's the one's the 3D Castlevania game. Guilty Gear, it's like, oh wow, this transition from 2D into 3D that kind of delivers on what we were all hoping the transition into 3D would be at the time, albeit almost 20 years later. But it is a thing where it's like, it doesn't compromise the identity of the thing. It just looks like a cleaner version of the thing that you were playing however many years ago.
Yeah, and the thing that's important to recognize is like, again, I'm here to like crap on Street Fighter 4. Like Street Fighter 4 looks goofy with the way its 3D models work. And that's fine because every Street Fighter looks a little different. So it's not like something you should damn it for. But there was this kind of like idea of like, what are we doing with graphics right now? Because Street Fighter 4, like it's different looking for all the pluses and minuses that comes with. And then you get King of Fighters 12 and 13, which are like the highest level of HD pixels known to mankind. But there are significant compromises that come with that. So this was like Xrd was the one game to perfectly split the uprights and deliver on everything.
Yeah. I also apologize for calling it Xrd for people who might get bothered by that.
It's both pronunciations are accepted. It's the thing is it's X3, but they didn't want to say XXX, so it's third, but with an X instead of the 3. It's Xrd or Xrd, but you're also creating a word, so it doesn't. The pronunciation's fine either way. People do it both.
Extreme.
Extreme.
It is. I see what they're trying to do. It's just like the Xrd is.
Yeah, regional dialects will also affect this because again, it's not a real word.
As Nick Weiger says, language is descriptive, not prescriptive.
Mm-hmm.
So you've talked about the Guilty Gear games of the past culminating into this. How do you feel about Strive?
Hate it.
Oh, really?
I cannot stand that game. And I know this comes off the back of me being like a gigantic hater for a lot of things. Again, I must stress the amount of games I love far outstrip the games I hate. It's just that the games I hate usually end up being bigger tentpole games, so they're like more easily recognizable as games that I'm bringing like heat to by not liking. But I cannot stand that game, and I am not alone with that. There was a noticeable rift between pre-Strive Guilty Gear players and Strive players. There's like I wouldn't say a splintering because that's a bit aggressive, but like it's a new generation of people who like Strive, and the previous Guilty Gear people more often than not do not like that game. This is not like a isolated, people being snobby for it. It is Strive is such a different game that people who liked Guilty Gear for things that you could go to Guilty Gear for decades cannot go to Strive for that.
Interesting. Do you feel like you are like the person saying fucking 09ers, but for Guilty Gear?
No. There's like some, like a lot of it is like subjective. Like I don't like the way Strive plays. That's a subjective take.
Sure.
And then there's some objective things like congratulations on making the single worst lobby system known to mankind. What are you doing?
Sure. Again, I'm an outsider. This is my first time playing a Guilty Gear game. Like, vague awareness of Guilty Gear is like, oh, the other video game series with the word gear in it that isn't metal. Yes. Like, I knew the name, but I never really saw people talk about it like as, the gaming du jour until Strive came out. And then suddenly I'm doing these events in 2021 where I'm doing the gaming zone for the conventions I'm working for. And suddenly people like, I'm doing the Dragon Ball FighterZ thing, and people are asking me like, when are you going to get Strive? And I'm like, oh, really? It's big enough that like I'm bringing it to casual events now. Is this a thing? And I ultimately didn't do it because I was winding down doing the gaming event stuff anyway. But Strive was being talked about in like casual fighting game circles. It wasn't just things that the high level fighting game players were, which it feels like the reputation of Guilty Gear as an outsider. Again, it's like it's more, at least the older games feel like hardcore things. And it seems like Daisuke is like a guy who's like, I want to make a crazy fighting game. So that feels like it lines up with the vision, but maybe you have a different take on that.
Yeah, that's the least crazy game he's ever made.
Yeah.
By leaps and bounds. The thing with Strive, and in general, we try like older Guilty Gear people. I'm only like dumping out of here for informative reasons. We try not to like poo-poo Strive too much because it's beating a dead horse with a dead horse at this point, that older Guilty Gear people don't like the game. But Strive was the darling of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because the first beta of that game came out with delay-based netcode, which is the old crappy netcode that people have been using for ages. And we're in literal lockdown at that point. We're not even in like the walking around pandemic phase. We're in the literal lockdown when that first beta comes out. And so as if the years previous, the response hasn't already been, please put fucking rollback in your games. Like, it was so overwhelming at that point that ArcSys had no choice but to put rollback in their game. And rollback is the difference between your game having a good online experience and a bad online experience. And when I say that, like, this has been around for ages, rollback's been around since like 2008.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that major Japanese developers, it was not a priority for them. So Strive comes out in the pandemic era with rollback, and it is like the tentpole, and like, a bunch of marketing as well. So it's a tentpole fighting game that can be played online with good netcode, and it just takes over because everyone's locked inside, and it has gained immense popularity because of that. And I'm glad that is popular. I'm glad that Daisuke is finally earning his like big money checks and like large scale awareness. But this is not even my take. This was a take from a friend of mine. But like, the way for us to see it is, we have wanted Guilty Gear to be big our entire lives, and now it is finally big, and it is a game we cannot possibly care about.
Do you feel like it was compromised in some way, or do you just feel like it's like you don't feel like the series has gotten away from you? You just feel like maybe this is just a game that was trying to appeal to a wider audience? What is your thought on like why? Besides,
it's a little of that. It is a game that I told you about expression.
Yes,
it is a game that lacks expression. Guilty, like, I don't know how much we'll have a time to like get into like the real nitty gritty of what makes playing Xrd so unbelievably fun, but those things are gone in Strive in very purposeful ways to try and attract new people, and it pushed a lot of people who play these games away. It was successful in getting new people, but at the expense of the people who played it beforehand. A lot of simplification of mechanics, new ideas for how to try and mitigate the bad feel of being a new player of a fighting game and getting whomped on, and removal of the really, really, really cool shit that Guilty Gear does, because if that cool shit happens to you, man, does it feel awful. But like, it's a fallacy, because that's just life. There's no way to get rid of those things. They're in every single fighting game, no matter how you design it.
Sure.
So what ended up happening from our perspective as like older Guilty Gear players is, and again, if you like Strive, I'm not trying to yuck too many yums, is just always like, older Guilty Gear players, we have very legitimate reasons why we do not like this game. It's just because it does not feel like Guilty Gear anymore. It lacks so many of the things that we have wanted from these games for years and years and years, and we're satiated by them, sometimes in abundance. And to go to the newest, most popular Guilty Gear, we want it to be there. We want it to be on top of the world finally as Guilty Gear fans. And then we touch that game and it's just like, no, this feels awful.
That has to feel frustrating to have a grievance with a series that you have grown up with, and then also see like that frustration. Like you probably have to avoid having that frustration subsumed into this larger culture war where people are mad that Bridget is trans. But like,
those people can kick rocks all day. The best part about Strive is Bridget is trans, and anyone who like beefs on Strive for those reasons, like I'll send you my personal address, we'll duke it out, like, and I'll win. Like straight up, stop that phony shit.
Yeah. Like there's like. That's just always an annoying thing when someone has a legitimate grievance with something, and then like there's like a side culture war thing happening by bad faith actors who have either been too stupid to notice or are just like tourists trying to pretend that they care about something. And the Bridget trans thing again. I've been here for 2 days, and there are people who are still trying to fight this war in 2025, and it's like, it's over, dude. Move on. Daisuke has even like clarified this. I have played these games in the few hours I have engaged with it, and it seems like this dude is very sincere about segregation and prejudice and how all these characters represent some different form of isolation from society, and like how they're able to self-actualize as people. Like, get over it, dog. Like, you lost. It's over. Move on. It's 2025, dog.
The thing that's also like really important about Strive is that is like the official canonization of Testament being non-binary. And I believe Daisuke said like Testament was always non-binary, but we just never had the terminology for that to know how to say that. And it's so easy to look back and be like, yes, we knew Testament was non-binary the entire time. We didn't have the verbiage for what that meant yet.
Yeah. So we can get more into the nitty-gritty to talk about Xrd here, but I like to do a little segment in the middle of the episode where we could talk about how people who are interested in playing the game can check it out. In this segment, No Country for Old Games. So, we're going to talk about Xrd in depth in a second, but before we do, let's talk about video game preservation. It means a great deal to me. Video games are an art form, and they create experiences that leave some kind of impact on the people who play them. People having a character like Bridget in Strive, who was a character in previous Guilty Gear games, have this journey of self-actualization with their gender, leaves an impact on people, even in a fighting game series. So these things are impactful for people, but that sometimes means little to publishers who have historically struggled with keeping games available on modern hardware. As time goes on, games that were once easily readily available become harder and harder to play and more difficult to acquire. So let's rate this game on a scale of A to Xrd. And Arg is obviously an expression of frustration at how hard it is to acquire this game. It's not me covertly advocating for piracy, which is illegal. That's so bad, guy. Really quickly, like I said, there's 3 versions of Guilty Gear Xrd. Sign, which was released for arcades initially in Japan in February of 2014. It was later released for PS3 and PS4 with crossplay between the 2 generations of consoles on December 4th in Japan, December 16th in North America, with Europe getting a digital-only release on June 3rd, 2015. A Windows version released worldwide on Steam later that December in 2015. The updated sequel, Xrd Revelator, released to arcades in Japan in August of 2015, with its PS3 and PS4 ports releasing in May and June of 2016. Steam version dropping later that December, once again, in 2016. Unlike Sign, there is no English voice dubbing, but other than that, the content expands. That's the thing that gives us the long cutscene story mode thing. It gives us some additional characters, some balancing, some minor tweaks. And this is also true of the third and final release, Revelator 2. Once again, no English dub, but other than that, an expansion off of the original and the Revelator. That one released in 2017 and is the final release, the one that is the recommended one to play and has the supported online. Whereas I don't think Sign has the supported online.
No, they don't.
But I think Revelator and Revelator 2 still do.
Yes, because Revelator 2 is built out of the same core as Revelator 1, whereas Sign is like a different release, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So I haven't personally tested that because I'm never touching Revelator 1 in any meaningful capacity. but I believe it works out that way just because they are the same game and it's more of a strict update within the same release.
Yeah, like you can purchase a thing that basically turns your Revelator into Revelator 2 if you just pay the little fee for it.
Yeah, because I think my copy still boots up as Revelator until it switches over to Revelator 2 when I get to the title screen.
Yeah. And what version do you play? Which like on what console?
Oh, PC. There's a lot of nuance to this, but PC is the one that has the updated netcode.
Yeah.
PS4 does not.
Yeah, and this is the thing. This is pretty easy as a game in terms to rank and availability. You can still buy Sign, and you can still buy Revelator, and then expand that into Revelator 2, or you can just buy Rev 2 as its own release. This is a game that hasn't really become less available the way other games have over the course of their lifetimes. And in fact, this is a game that has received quality of life improvements in the last few years. This is a game where its last major update was in 2017, but on September 25th, 2022, over 5 years since Rev 2 released, more than 1 year after Strive released, Arc System Works released a video announcing that Rev 2 would receive an update to their online modes, particularly in the Steam version, to use that rollback netcode, which we've talked about a lot. In just the plainest and simplest terms, it is a dev tool used to improve the online multiplayer experience, and this is especially necessary in fighting games when there are like these things come down to like individual frames. So adding a major quality of life update to an older title that doesn't have nearly as many online players as Strive does is really fucking cool.
Yeah, Xrd getting rollback changed my life. I'm not even being facetious.
Yeah?
Because the thing with when Strive came out and it had rollback and plus R, which is the final version of that Guilty Gear X2 line, Guilty Gear X2, X and Core plus R, that had rollback. Strive had rollback, and Xrd was at that time deemed to be impossible to get rollback onto because of the way the game engine was. It was thought that like you'd have to rebuild the game to integrate rollback. Xrd players specifically were like, we're done for. We're going to be the redheaded stepchild of Guilty Gear forever. They're never going to be able to put this on the game. So when that was announced, it was almost as important as the initial trailer for the game because it was thought to be impossible.
Yeah. Which is why I want to say, like, this is a game that has made itself more available in a certain way than like a traditional re-release would have done, right? Because it didn't fundamentally change the game anyway, but it made it more playable, and it made the people that you can play it with, like from like outside of your own respective country or region in your country, more accessible to you. Literally a new world opened up to players, and I think that is just really, really wonderful.
Ever since that rollback was implemented, 2 years ago or so now, there have been online Guilty Gear Xrd tournaments almost every single day of the fucking week.
Yeah.
Yes, every week, Pat the Flip, who's like one of the big Xrd guys, puts out the graphic of here's this week's online tournaments. It's always like Lasagna Gear on Monday, Rev Tuesday on Tuesday, TMN is running Wednesday, TXT is running Thursday, someone's running Friday, Dust Bowl's also running certain Tuesdays. You'll get Saturdays. There was Sundays where you'd have Morning Burst. There was a long time where you had an additional tournament on Mondays. They just started up a specifically European with access to good connections to the North American tournaments. I think it's on Saturdays. Like, this is every single week.
That's wonderful.
And
that still happens to this day.
Ever since that rollback happened.
That's wonderful. Like, look, I usually talk about availability in terms of the actual like physical copies or like digital copies people can get access to. But I do think that's just like making a multiplayer game, something I don't talk about enough on this show, just more accessible to a greater audience of people. Just gives life to a game that could have just faded into obscurity as Strive became the new normal, or just like the only way. But it seems like they really care about the history of Guilty Gear, especially with a game as complicated as a narrative as it, because you can't play the other Guilty Gear games on Steam, for example. But this actually, like, keeping the online part intact, just that really matters. So I'm going to give Guilty Gear Xrd an A for availability, because I just really think that that's just a really wonderful story about resilience in an online space and building community within the same copy of a game. This is a game that did really well critically and has its fans to this day, like you were talking about. And the review aggregation website Metacritic's Xrd Sign holds an 84 out of 100. Revelator and Rev2 both hold an 86. But ultimately, we're not here to talk about what this game means to a greater audience or to critics. We want to talk about what it means to somebody who played it, specifically you, Jay. So let's get into it.
Welcome, one and all, to Riley Hopkins and their amazing friends, the actual play podcast that steals. What does that mean? That means that we take stories from corporations and come back and tell our own fanfic-inspired actual plays with them. We do things like a Star Wars podcast that takes place 300 years after The Last Jedi. What if any Zoids media was good? We tell stories in those spaces that are better than the ones that the corporations tell us, because we're not f***ing cowards. Please, come join us at Riley Hopkins and their amazing friends to hear a plethora of wonderful stories every once in a while on the Moonshot Podcast Network. Riley Hopkins and their amazing friends. Hosted by me, Riley Hopkins.
What is it that you love about Guilty Gear Xrd? And what does it do that more video games should do?
How do I say this? Guilty Gear Xrd makes you feel like the smartest person that ever lived or the biggest fucking idiot on earth.
Yeah.
And what's important is that you can put that feeling on your opponent. And that's something that's inherent to all fighting games. When I do the cool thing in a fighting game, my opponent loses good feel points. And when my opponent does sick shit to me, I feel worse for it. But Xrd, as we work our way to the nitty-gritty things that actually matter, we have to start with, like, Xrd is so free-form and filled with expression that you are allowed to play the game however you see fit, and you are able to win matches doing whatever you think can win, and you can make your opponents feel as if the world is crumbling around them in ways that so few games can ever do. And I'm going to start with one of the classic mechanics to Guilty Gear, one of their most influential mechanics, the burst mechanic. Are you familiar, Keifer?
Technically, yes.
So, introduced in X2 is something called burst. It's a secondary meter that you start the rounds, you start a set with your burst meter full. At any time, you can press dust and one other attack button, and you can burst. If you're not being hit, it's a gold burst, and if it hits your opponent, you get all of your regular meter immediately. But the important thing about burst is that if you burst in the middle of being comboed, you will automatically burst out of it and hit your opponent and be out of that combo.
You don't want to burst too soon.
You actually, some say burst early, burst often.
Okay.
But the nuance to the burst system is that when you burst, there is a startup associated with bursting, and then your character rises through the air ever so slightly, kind of like they just elevate a little bit. And both of these things are extremely important because it's not instantaneous and it moves your character up. So therefore, you think, and it's like that startup is fast. It's really fast. It's not instant, but it's pretty damn fast. And so for a lot of people who play this game, when someone bursts out of their combo, you're like, well, what the fuck do I do about that? They just decided, I'm going to be out of here. And you can build that burst meter back. Usually you get, if you're economical about it, you can have like one burst per round. So a lot of like newer players will be like, well, what the fuck? Like, how do I stop this person from recognizing that they're in my big fuck damage combo and they're just going to burst out? The more you play Guilty Gear, the more you realize the act of bursting is incredibly slow. And you can labor your combos in such a way that will make them bursting feel like the biggest dumb fuck around. There's a video you should look up at some point, Keifer, called Get Hype for AH3. This is a very old video about Arcana Heart 2. And there's an iconic phrase uttered by one Noel Brown during this video that goes something to the tune of, Arturo bursting early like a dumb fuck. And that's the feeling you want to put on people. You want to make them burst thinking they're going to get out of this combo and like have another chance at life, and you have already thought 2 steps ahead of them, because you can set your combos in such a way that you do one of your light attacks, which will actually recover in time, that during their burst startup animation, you can block it, and then they're punishable afterwards. So they've taken this big resource that they thought was going to get them back in the game, and you've immediately neutralized them and put them on an even worse back foot, because you get to start another combo on them uncontested. Or you can structure your combo in such a way, given the aerial approach of the game, that when they burst, that slight rise they do will actually put them too far out of range for the burst to connect, because the burst around them has to connect with you to knock you out of the combo that you're doing to them. So both of those things are very structural to how you mitigate your opponent having burst. It at so many levels of this game, it feels like, oh my God, they have burst. They're going to use it. I just have to accept that. And no, you don't. You can actually think around this constantly and structure combos in such a way that stops them from doing that. It makes them feel bad, makes them feel like their last saving grace was just removed in a way that makes them lose the round. But Keifer, there's a third thing you can do.
A secret third thing. I love
There's
it.
a secret third thing you can do with bursts. In Guilty Gear, all throws are 1 frame. They're not like Street Fighter 3, where it's like a 2-button throw that has a startup animation and then it connects. These are proximity-based throws. You press your heavy slash button within throw range, which is like very tiny. You have to be right next to the person, but it starts up in 1 frame. And so because of that, a lot of things are shaped by that. But this also works in the air. You can air throw people within 1 frame if you're close enough. Bursts are throwable. And the thing to note is that this isn't optimal. It's better to block a burst because you get a big punish. You make them feel like an idiot and then you kill them for it. If you want to hurt them not in the game, but outside of the game, you know they're about to burst and you purposely stop your combo and you jump and you throw their burst before it even comes out. It can happen so fast that people watching might not even realize it until they realize, why did the air throw happen to that combo? And it's actually not optimal, but you can do it because it hurts your opponent, like physically. Like the person sitting down next to you will feel worse mentally because you were so in their head. You knew they were going to do it at this specific moment. You stopped the combo and you threw their burst just to say, I know what you're doing. I know what you're thinking right now.
Watch this, Lise. You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now.
And it's important to recognize that is not optimal.
Mhm.
You get a throw punish, which is nowhere near as much damage as if you just block that thing normally. But you do it because you make them feel bad. And it feels bad when it happens to you too. But it's that level of expression. That's just one mechanic in Xrd.
Yeah, like that's expression. It is the dance that you're doing. You are punishing yourself a little bit in terms of a combo just to make another person feel worse. Jesus Christ. That is psychological warfare. This is why I'm not built for this. This is why I have to stick with my stupid person hero shooters or my like 3D my arena fighters, is because if somebody did that to me in close quarters, I would probably kill myself. I don't know. It takes a lot of mental fortitude to be in this scene, I feel like, to subject yourself to a potential public humiliation to something like that, which isn't to say that people should not do it, simply that this is the beauty of video games.
You have to be built for it. Yeah.
It's like astronauts.
I've been on stage, I've been broadcasted to hundreds, and every time it happens, I'm like, fuck, man, I can't look like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have to at least look, if I'm going to lose, I have to at least look good.
Like, yeah, no, it's like, I will not die a monster.
Yeah, there's a pressure of like, because in Guilty Gear, it's so easy to just be like run over by someone who's so much better than you, because the amount of layers of thinking that are going into things. You can be playing against someone who's like 5 steps ahead of you, knows what you're going to do before you do it, and just makes you look like an idiot.
Sure.
There's in ways more other than just that burst grab I talked about. Like there's so many ways to just be like, I am in a conversation with this person by way of being so far up their ass, I can read their thoughts. Like I'm in their body. I know what's going on. And
yeah.
it's freaky when it happens, because I've been on both ends of that. I've been read like a book, And then there's been times where it's like, I'm playing against a person online, and I know the next 3 things they're going to do.
It's
after
chess.
Just like, yeah, even after just a round or 2 of playing it, I'm like, I know exactly what they're going to do. And if I do this, 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 and this, I will beat them at every single turn, and I'll make them look like an idiot, and I'll win.
I know you can read my thoughts, boy. Meow, 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 meow,
Good.
meow, 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 meow.
It's chess, but with rock music playing in the background. It is not simply the act of playing the game, it is the act of psychologically understanding and humiliating sometimes, or just like thinking about what your opponent would do and reacting almost more to the player than the actual game itself. Like the game is merely a vessel to get into the head of the opponent. But again, instead of it being chess pieces, it is a guy named Soul Bad Guy fighting another guy named Answer,
He's so cool.
Yeah, it is. Soul Bad Guy rules.
He's so cool.
If there's one thing I can contribute to this conversation, you can talk to me about the actual mechanics of, again, this is merely one aspect of the game. It's a game full of so many high risk, potentially high reward mechanics that may not even be touched in a round. You can contribute all these things, all this like this actual like mechanical like complexity. But I can say Soul Bad Guy rules.
It's so funny because Soul Bad Guy is not like top tier in Xrd, but he's always been like high mid. Like he's always been one of the stronger characters. And the thing that's so great about Soul is that he has not like main character plot armor in terms of being good, but they always design him with like 3 of the most fucked up stupid buttons you'll ever see on a character. So he's never busted, but like his 2D, his 5K, and his JH are like legacy buttons that are supposed to be as stupid as humanly possible. His 2D is a sweep that is so low to the ground that he can just go under people. His 5K is an anti-air that used to come out in 3 frames. It's like unbelievably fast. It eventually got kind of like tuned down to like 5 frames to be a little slower. But it's like for most of Guilty Gear, it's like he has the fastest anti-air in the game with 5K. And then JH is a 2-hitting aerial move that has no recovery on it, and that's not normally how things work. So like it is, you can't burst it, there's no recovery. He's always in. It's like it's a legacy move that every time people look at it, they're like, oh, there should be something I could do against this. It's like, no, there's no recovery. He's always going to be at advantage afterwards. You just have to accept that. And he's never been the best, but he'll always have certain things about him that make him still feel like he's the main fucking character, because he's so cool.
Yeah, this is the thing, right? A character like Soul Bad Guy, that's like the baseline, like normal character. That's supposed to be this series Ryu.
He's the Ryu of this game.
Ryu's like here's the thing, Ryu's iconic, but like functionally he is a guy. Like when you think of Street Fighter 2, like as a person who actually played Street Fighter 2, you're probably thinking of like Blanca or Zangief. But like it's Ryu's the main guy. Like that is default character. This game's default character is a guy named Soul Bad Guy who has a bunch of belts on and looks like, again, he's just a walking Queen reference. That is the baseline.
Yeah, the thing about Guilty Gear that is so awesome is that when Daisuke is cooking this shit up in the lab and he's like, I'm going to add the coolest things I've ever heard of or ever thought of into this fighting game, he pulls it off every time, because the difference in ways that characters are built to be like a playable kit, sometimes that's the word that gets thrown around, like a kit. They are probably the single most inventive and unique and expressive and outlandish characters in any fighting game ever. They've always been there. There has never been like a lazy design. Like the laziest design is Kai, who is the Ken to Soul's Ryu, and Kai has like your somewhat standard, like I have a fireball and a DP. But even then, Kai rules. Like Kai's so cool. I hate him to death because I have a bad matchup against him. But like he's the closest thing you're going to have to a standard fighting game character. And then every other character is like the craziest, most nonsensical idea of what you could think of for a fighting game character that is almost always pulled off and works.
Sure.
The big thing that got me into X2 back in high school was the character Venom, who is an assassin who fights with a pool cue. And that's like, oh, that's like, you know, when you're 14, you're like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. And then you're 35 and you're like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard.
Shadow the Hedgehog's so cool.
Shadow the Hedgehog's so cool. But they're not lazy about that. And Venom is one of the more complex characters in the game because he can set a pool ball with each of the 4 attack buttons, and he can set 4 pool balls. But if he sets them in different routines, if he goes like punch ball, slash ball, heavy slash ball, they will set in different formations, and then any of his attacks will strike the pool balls, and depending on what attack he uses, they'll move at different speeds, and they'll connect with each other when they hit. So you can have a significant amount of different ways to set pool balls and then strike them to fill the screen, or to set traps, or to cover your approaches, or to set up mix-ups, and you have to know all the ways this works. Like, I think the standard knockdown is like, you do a knockdown with Venom, you set K ball, and he could teleport these balls as well for whatever reason. You like set K ball, jump, hit K ball. As you're coming down, you can do a high-low 50-50 because the K ball is covering your approach.
And the best part is he's also gay.
He's also gay. Again, like the progressive elements of Guilty Gear have been around for a long time.
You look up, like, that's the thing with like Guilty Gear lore is like there's like maybe 1.5 bad guys. Everyone else who like everyone that you assume like, oh, that's a villain at face value is like, no, they just look badass.
Yeah. It was like Dizzy was like the villain of X, and everyone loves Dizzy. Testament was the villain of X2. Everyone loves Testament. Ramathal's the villain of Xrd, I suppose, but she's adorable.
Yeah, it's like he's like almost so endeared to the characters that he's made that he refuses to let them stay bad or evil. And it's like, I just wanted to draw a badass character, and now I have this like shirtless hunk who has a cloak over his face that plays pool and is gay for another badass looking character named Zato1 who has a shadow dog. And it's, I don't know, this stuff's cool. You talking about Venom reminded me that his instant kill, which is a mechanic we can talk about in a second, is like literally turning a person into a pool ball. It's crazy, but like instant kills, which I wanted to talk about when you were talking about these like high risk mechanics that can just cause like psychological madness. Imagine if the fatalities in Mortal Kombat were on the table, but you have to like do like such precise stuff that it might not even be worth doing because you could absolutely just fuck your whole game up.
Yeah, instant kills are kind of like the party mechanics, so to speak. Like people who casually play these games are like, that's so cool, I can hit someone with an instant kill. In reality, they're almost impossible to like pull off in a competitive match, but they are not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
There are specific routes where it is, you can put a person into a stun state, hit them enough times, you get them stunned. If you recover your combo fast enough from that, you can insta-kill them before they recover.
Mm-hmm.
There is a mechanic where when someone is in Hellfire state, which is like the last 20% of their life, you can do a instant kill combo on them, and that's actually optimal. Like some people are like, man, you insta-killed me. And it's like, no, that was optimal. The combo wouldn't have finished there. I could insta-kill you and win the round. That was optimal. So there are still like situations where it is competitively viable and competitively optimal to instant kill someone.
Yeah. It's this thing where I never pulled it off and I was playing against computers, but it's like this thing that's like, I can't believe that this is in the game as an option among everything else that this game's throwing at you, because it feels like it's a thing where I could never, like, I enjoyed this game despite not me getting a full grasp on it just because the aura was so cool. And like I was having actual fun just playing the game like it was a normal fighting game, even though it is emphatically not. But it's just like, it feels like this game has everything if you are willing to put in the work to get it. It's like almost a conversation you're having with the game match to match. It's that like old adage about like something being easy to learn, difficult to master. But this is taking it to a step farther where it's like I think it's easy to appreciate, difficult to understand. And then there's just this extra like expert mode of like, all right, when you're actually good at this stuff, this is like where the fun actually begins. It's weird to explain.
So here's the real like sick in the head example of like what takes place at the tippity top high levels of this game.
Mm-hmm.
So in Street Fighter 4, do a hard knockdown to someone, like you sweep or you do a combo that ends in a hard knockdown. There is a standard amount of time that they are in a knockdown state, and then they get up and you can use them again. That is a locked time frame. Guilty Gear, it is variable depending on the character. So some characters get up in 23 frames of a knockdown. Some characters get up in 27 frames from a knockdown. And what this does is that when that character is knocked down, you have to adjust what you're going to do for okizeme, which is okizeme is the Japanese term for setting up your attack on a opponent that is recovering from knockdown. It's referred to as oki. It's your mix-ups, your pressure. What are you going to do now that they are recovering from knockdown? They are locked in the state and you are not. So you have the freedom to apply something to them. Many characters are based around the idea of getting a knockdown, running their oki, which involves mixing them up either left, right, high, low, strike, or throw. Because every character has a variable wake-up time to it, or it's a locked wake-up time to them, but it's variable across the cast, you don't run into the problem that Street Fighter IV had, where there was a bug that allowed you to basically unblockable people in Street Fighter IV because you could time it in such a way that the attack would hit right at the center of their character, and within one frame, it would be either a left or a right, and you basically had to guess, but the guess was nigh impossible. That's kind of one of the reasons why I hate Street Fighter IV. That's like a tippity-top competitive level reason. In Guilty Gear, you have to think, and it's not like, a 23 frame wake-up time versus a 24 frame wake-up time. I gotta crunch my numbers in real time. And for anyone, who needs a reminder, 60 frames in 1 second. This is really fast stuff. It's more like, is it a slow wake-up time? Is it a medium wake-up time? Is it a slightly longer wake-up time? You have to always think about the character you're facing and what their wake-up times are so that you properly apply your okizeme. Otherwise, if you mistime it, then that 1 frame throw I talked about could be in your future, because if you're sitting next to that character and you're planning on doing an attack, but it whiffs because you got your timing off, they can just throw you because it only takes 1 frame.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really perverted. They have 2 different wake-up times depending on if they have a face-down knockdown state or a face-up knockdown state. So you're juggling between recognizing, did they get knocked down looking down at the ground, or did they get knocked down looking up from the ground? Because the timing is different for each of those. And the character I play, Sin Kisuke, he is specifically notorious because he has one of the fastest face-down wake-up times and one of the slowest face-up wake-up times. So people who are like better at this game than I could ever hope to be, people will beef their oki on me because there's like a 9-frame difference between the two of them. And that's a huge difference in the grand scheme of making sure you're setting up your oki right.
I like the bed man because he's in a bed.
He's in the bed.
That's all really impressive stuff, because it's stuff that like you have to know on a level. Like you don't have to know like the exact frame, but you have to know the character enough to know like, okay, face down. Like you have to like almost like make a mnemonic device.
You just have to know. That's the problem. You just have to know. And that's why you can play this game forever, is because holding all, like the human brain can only hold so many ideas at once. You're going to have to hold those ideas at some point, and you might be thinking about something else, and you might miss out on that. So like you can play this game forever for those reasons, because no one is always thinking about everything.
Yeah, that's the psychological thing, right? Like you have to like, and this is a thing where like there's like so many like layered mechanics to stuff that can make this stuff more dynamic and interesting to watch, where an expert can be undone by somebody who is technically not as good, but is just thinking about the game differently or thinking about this particular match differently, because you fundamentally could be playing a different game from your opponent, at least on a psychological level.
Yeah.
If you're just thinking about the right things, or potentially just a different thing from your opponent that they are not considering because you're just fundamentally,
There's a saying, good beats stupid, great beats good, perfect beats great, stupid beats perfect.
With this game, who is your main character?
Sin,
which is Kai's son, correct?
Kai and Dizzy's son.
And Soul is like his father-in-law.
Soul's basically his godfather.
Yeah.
Quick lore thing. Kai marries Dizzy. They have a child. But because Kai is the king of Valeria, it's not like his marriage is secret and his son is secret. So Soul basically raises Sin.
He looks exactly like the fuck like his dad. He dresses like his dad. Secret son, my ass. Continue.
I know. Sin is like super duper chuny. He's the chuniest little bastard that ever lived. Also, just fun fact: the gears are like Dizzy's 5 years old. Sin's 3. Like the gears don't age properly, so like they're like babies.
And Soul Bad Guy's like 200 or something.
Yeah, Soul Bad Guy's he's old. Good old Frederick. There's so much anime shit in this game. It's as deep as you want to get. It goes there. But yeah, Sin is the character I have played since the release of this game. I am literally the oldest, longest playing Sin player in North America. There's no one who's been playing this character longer than me. Do not mistake that as me being the best Sin. I am far from it.
Mhm.
But you could maybe make the argument that I'm like at the very end of like the top 10 Sin players in North America, but only because that number probably includes 13.
Yeah, it's like what David Bowie said. It doesn't matter who got there first. What matters is like who did it the best or the loudest. You know.
Yeah, I'm nowhere near the best Sin. Nowhere
But
close.
It's remarkable that you are the first though. Like that shows how hard in the paint you are. And like you're talking about this stuff at a very meta, I should say, level. That shows your like the technical appreciation that you have for the thing. I want to talk about the actual like the elegance of this game a little bit. The presentation of the thing and how that's able to like stimulate that and make people appreciate what this game has going on under the hood. In terms of like character design and like music, what do you like love about this game?
This is the greatest. Like the Guilty Gear has the greatest music ever.
Mhm.
Until Strive. But Xrd, I have to set the stage again for a second because we talked about how like Guilty Gear really started at X, and
Like Street Fighter started at 2.
Street Fighter, exactly, it's the same thing. Street Fighter starts at 2, Guilty Gear starts at X. No disrespect to Missing Link, but that game is like busted stupid. But X is where like you begin to really get the flow of what's being codified for Guilty Gear, and one of those things is the music. Character themes in Guilty Gear are really important because they have not changed for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think even going back to Missing Link, Guilty Gear 1, many of the characters retain their character theme and they've just kind of been built on. So before Strive, if you weren't someone who played Guilty Gear, there was a chance you do Guilty Gear because of one song, Holy Orders, Be Just or Be Dead. And that's Kai Kisuke's theme. It is one of the greatest speed metal tracks you'll ever hear. I'm patiently waiting you to drop this track in the edit because it's going to happen. It's a beautifully written Shred City song, and Kai has had that song forever. And there was a tension to, and trust me, Kai is not an exception to this. Everyone's had their songs for a long time, and all the songs from Guilty Gear X and X2 are some of the best metal you'll ever hear. Just not even like video, like it transcends good video game music. It is just, here's an excellent fighting game and one of the best like shred metal soundtracks, shred metal albums you'll ever hear. So there was a concern leading up to Xrd, like, okay, are we getting new music? We haven't had new music. I've known Holy Orders, Be Just or Be Dead for most of my life at this point. And one of the things that I think really solidifies just how good Xrd is that they gave everyone new music themes, and they still have the sensation or aura of their old themes while still being totally new themes. Magnolia Eclair is Kai's new theme, and it's not as good as Holy Orders, Be Just or Be Dead, because how could it be? But it's still a really, really good song. And so you can hear bits and pieces of everyone's old themes come through in their new themes. Chip's Flash Hider, doesn't exactly sound like Suck a Sage, but it has the same energy of it, so you can feel that it's an evolution of it. I'm trying to remember what May's Xrd theme is called, but it's got very much the same bright and sparkly tone as Blue Water, Blue Sky, which is probably like another top 5 most iconic Guilty Gear songs. And it's very nice that they also put all the old songs in there. But when the Xrd soundtrack is hitting its hardest, it is just a showcase that like this wasn't a one-trick pony. They didn't just get it right the one time and run with it. They can continue to make just unbelievable shred metal, and it's a bit more like chunky hardcore, like Big Thumpa Thumpa in Xrd. But so many of these songs are just insane, and thankfully, my favorite song is the theme of Sin. It's his character theme. It's called Just Do It. It is just unbelievable, bombastic. Starts with this shred nasty finger-picking riff before it goes into a song that feels so like energetically bravacious. It's all no thinking. I'm just going ahead. I'm doing the next thing. I'm gonna win. I just believe in myself. It's unfucking real music, and every time I have to like go on stage and like, play a tournament match and like the pressure's on, I make sure to select my character as fast as possible because whoever selects first gets to choose the stage and music. And I turn it to Sin's theme because like I need to hear my theme to get myself in the mood to play this competitive match. I need to be in the zone.
It's like a soundtrack with a game attached to it.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I've been thinking a lot about this phenomenon in a lot of media I've been watching. It's not exclusive to video games, but like a lot of things I've been encountering lately have this should have been a musical energy to it. I've been thinking about that. Like I say this is like this being one of my favorite games I played recently. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth feels like Square Enix is inching closer and closer to like, we want to make a musical video game, but we don't know if the world's ready. I think the world is ready, guys. You've seemed to like want to be in this mode since Final Fantasy X-2, and I think you should lean into it. But that's a tangent. Like I was watching the second season of Arcane, the League of Legends show, and I was like, it seems like you guys wanted to make a musical. You should just make the musical. It would have been better with the musical stuff instead of, doing a music video. And this is like a thing where it's like, this already kind of is a musical. Like this game is like so built around music as its core identity. Like even if the characters aren't literally singing, the musical like identity of this video game is so, I don't know, omnipresent, but I think like there's just like a harmony between the music and the gameplay and the visuals of everything, that it's like all contributing to the whole that makes it, I wouldn't even say greater than the sum of its parts. It's just like the music is the same way that like the visuals are. It's all complementary, and I understand that's probably a function of it being largely the brainchild of Daisuke, but it's just like, am I making sense at all?
Yeah, no, you're completely spot on, because Daisuke is such a unbelievably talented composer. Like this guy, there's nothing that this guy's ever touched that he wasn't phenomenal at. He's an amazing illustrator. He's a composer that would put most people to shame, and then he also made a fighting game that's one of the best to ever do it. Daisuke's music does such a good job telling you the personality of each character without using a single word.
That's it.
And it goes beyond the way that like Chip's theme is fast and speedy because he's the ninja with low health and high mobility, or Potemkin's got the chugging bassy song because he's the grappler with slow movement who hits hard.
Yeah, I know Zangief.
There's like those basic ones, but then you can really pick out individual pieces of personality within character themes. Like Axel has, I think his theme's, I don't think his theme's Momentary Life. Maybe it's the original. No, it's not the original. I can't remember Axel's theme in X2, but Axel's theme has this whimsicalness to how the melody is played that also then uses the bridge to sound like an old-timey jazz song, because he is this happy-go-lucky character who has been displaced through time as a time traveler against his will. And you can hear that in the song without it saying anything. So like there's so much personality to these characters that comes through with no words, just the music. But I do want to make one thing that's specific to Xrd clear. This is the Guilty Gear where they started doing vocal themes or vocal songs. And that's a big part of that trailer I talked about. That big initial trailer is the song Heavy Day, which is the sign, key song. It is voiced, and it is voiced by Naoki. I can't remember his last name, but he is singing with such intensity that sounds like he is fist fighting English as he's singing.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was kind of like, okay, what's this guy's vocal thing? It was a little bit of not so sure about this when it first happened, but nowadays I want to get the chorus "Death Comes a Riding on a Midnight Train" bicep tattooed. It's so evocative and so heavy, and it's just crushingly powerful song.
6 times knocking on the door, no response, but hey, you're ready back to back. Death comes a riding on a midnight train, back to back. Conscience is slipping to the air, back to back. Cannot let anyone do it again, back to back. I can no longer pretend. Give me a break, you down. Just when I get by my desk again, lazy down while I have it day.
One of the other things is that there are some very somber songs to it as well. Lily is a vocal theme that's the credits to the song, and it's a power ballad almost. That's a really famous one. You can't play that. You can't play the credit themes during the matches. That's the one rule. So that will never show up during a fight. But it's still a very iconic song because of how beautiful it is. And then there's a pop song called "Birthday Train," which is not a metal song. It is just a pop rock song. And for a long time, it was the meme of Xrd. People would get up on stage, be like, all right, top 8. This is about to be the hypest matches we've seen all weekend. And then someone would play Birthday Train. And it's just this jangle pop, really lovey-dovey song. And everyone kind of thinks it's a joke. But with time, now everyone just loves Birthday Train. I might play Birthday Train at my funeral. It's such a happy-go-lucky, cheerful song. And it comes from literally the most metal video game series I can think of.
I talked about synesthesia a little bit in the Res episode I did. One sensory experience creates an involuntary experience with another sense. So it's people who musicians will talk about how they sort of see color when they are listening to music. And I feel in his own way, Daisuke has some sort of synesthesia with how he goes about creating this world and the characters, where it's he's hearing the music first, and the expression of how he feels about that music is taken out onto a character. And it's Soul Bad Guy to him is what Queen sounds like to him, or when he has other characters based off of bands like Helloween or Venom or things of that nature. It's he's sort of synthesizing just various aspects of the musical form onto these characters. And it's not all music. There's definitely visual references to other works and media in his creations. But the way that everything sort of integrates, you're talking about a guy fighting with the English language as they're singing these songs. That's what it feels like. It's transcending the actual language barrier, which is certainly helpful in a game that in its subsequent iterations is in Japanese audio only, be understood universally purely through the experience of engaging with the game. You don't need to know Soul Bad Guy's 200-year lifetime history to know this character is a certain way, and it's not just because of how he's designed, but how the character moves and how the music plays around him.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing that allows Guilty Gear to be such an auteur work, is that because Daisuke is in control of every aspect of the design, from how characters look to how they play to how they sound to what type of music represents them, everything happens in stereo with itself. It is an auteur work in the most literal, non-derogatory work, because it is, we say this as a joke, but it's kind of true. It's Daisuke's vision. That's the term we use.
Right. There's I'm not okay. I'm not, coming after Daisuke's intelligence in any way. I don't know like his background or his educational thing, right? But like the presentation of his work. This is a person who's very obviously gifted and talented and smart and knows what he's doing and like using these aesthetics, but it's like borderline vulgar in a way, but he's communicating like very sincere ideas. And like his hope, as he said in interviews, is like, I hope I'm able to like create something that changes the world in some way through the expression of this thing. And it's this thing where it's like brilliance and talent and like technique aren't inherently intellectual ideas to be good or to have something artistic to express. I think a lot about like the Mozart Salieri thing, right? Where Mozart's like ability was just like almost like he was a vessel for his ability, and Salieri was like, I know everything, I'm smarter, I'm like more this, that, and the other, but like he was just being constantly outdone by this dude who just like had it. Dumb guy talent versus like smart guy talent or anything like that. Not to reduce.
I know it's hard not to reduce it down, but yeah, it does kind of just feel like there's a level of freak at play.
Yeah, but like Daisuke is like almost like a Mozart of a kind in that way. He's brilliant, but it's like it's almost like it's in ways it's like he's a vessel of a kind with how much like expression that he has inside of his body.
Completely, couldn't agree more.
We've talked this game up and down in terms of praise so far. What criticisms do you have for it? Or like, what do you wish it did better?
I wish certain aspects of the balance were a little nicer. I'm really like struggling to try and find actual flaws with the game because I love it so much.
Yeah.
There is something that cropped up during this time that has been colloquially known as an Arxis patch. And that is a balance patch that is intended to make the game better, but instead makes the characters who are at the top even better and the characters who are at the bottom even worse. And Xrd suffers from that. When Revelator 1 was when Johnny came to the cast. He was originally from X2. And Johnny has been the best character in the game ever since. And they have nerfed him to be still the best character of the game, and they have nerfed him to still be the best character of the game. He's just undefeatably the best character in the game. Elfelt is the same way. I hate Elfelt. Elfelt is the one character like everyone hates. If you look up Pat the Flip, he's like, why he did a video on why does everyone hate Elfelt? It's because like Elfelt is maybe the closest thing to like a fumble proof character you can have in Guilty Gear, which is a very, very easy game to fumble. But like Elfelt feels like she just plays herself sometimes in a way that like is anachronistic to how difficult Guilty Gear is. And she's been top 3 or so pretty much the entire game. And to the flip side, like the characters who are bad in this game, they've been given no quarter. Potemkin has never been good. Jacko might have been good on release and then got destroyed into the ground. When we were in the green room, I told you to try and look up the Dust Loop entry for Bedman's 6H because you were talking about how you like Bedman. And the Dust Loop entry is like a Japanese funeral picture for his 6H because he had a good 6H and then they replaced it with a significantly worse new move. It was just like a strict nerf, and he was already not a good character. That said, this is still a game where like you can win with any character, but there has been some pretty uneven balance decisions made in this game. And on a personal level, my character Sin, this is the last version of this game forever, and it's the worst version of him. And I have to hold that for the rest of my life, but I'll still play him because he's my boy. I'm never going to play a different character. But as I said, I've played every version of this game, and every other version was a better version of Sin.
Yeah. That's a thing, right? Like, anytime I get into a game that updates live at any point, I'm like, oh God, I hope they don't ruin my guy. I'm a lapsed Overwatch player. So like you would just wake up and one day the character you played as was gone forever.
I listened to the Fine Time episode.
Yeah.
Shout outs to Fine Time.
Yeah. It's what if I like during the criticism section, I just criticize a different game?
We always shit on Overwatch.
I empathize is the point.
Yeah.
As a new person, it's like I don't really have like the technical know-how for like how to approach issues I had with the game because it seems like everything is there to me. I'm a guy who is like, that guy's name is Faust. I like the Faust story. I look him up and it's like, oh yeah, the bag over his head, that is a reference to David Lynch's The Elephant Man, and it's like, there he is again, the most influential filmmaker in video games. David Lynch just casually referenced in a fighting game about rock music and girls with giant boobs destroying the world, as I understand the plot to be. Eno being like maybe the one permanently bad character in the cast.
Even then, she's been reworked. She's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's good now.
Oh, is she? Anyway,
I believe so.
Like a hero, or like a character.
I think as a character, like everyone gets their time to be good now. This requires like Strive story, and I'm not familiar with it, but like to my knowledge, she's fine now.
Oh, cool. Well, she's a bastard in this, and
Yeah,
here's the
she
thing.
is.
I find it all delightful and engaging, and like even though like in terms of narrative, it's impenetrable to me. I cannot be frustrated at me not getting it, because on a level, I feel like even though this guy isn't looking back at the screen in a way saying, "Come on, dude, catch up." Like they're not trying to hold your hand through like understanding the story, but they're also not shaming the person for not having done the homework either. It's just focused on being itself. And it feels like I'm won over despite me not knowing what the fuck is going on a mechanical level, on a narrative level, or anything, because I just fuck with this guy's vision so much. I don't see myself like dedicating hundreds of hours to this, but this is a game that I'm thinking about fondly, and it's like a game I think very highly of, despite it not... It's emphatically not made for me and like how I approach video games, but like I see it and I like it when I'm playing it.
You should watch the top 8 from Combo Breaker 2024. Because I'm on the broadcast.
Sure.
But it's like if you want to engage with Guilty Gear, a great way of doing that is watching high level tournament play, because it's exciting and it's dramatic, and there's characters both inside and outside of the game, and that's when it feels like this is what this is supposed to be in a sense.
Okay. There's like so much here that I just really appreciate, like how every character again feels like, you know, the weird character from a different video game just all being brought together under one game. Jacko, I don't know what this character's deal is at all on a narrative level, but it's like her moveset is like, here is a MOBA character just dropped into a fighting game. Does it work? I don't know. Good luck fighting her though.
Keifer, that's Soul Bad Guy's wife.
That's Soul Bad Guy's wife?
That's yeah.
I thought he was gay.
It's you. Well, I guess it's a joke to everyone else, but no. His true love is obviously Kai.
Yeah.
You've never seen two people argue like a married couple more than them.
That's my beard, Jacko Valentine.
Jacko's the reincarnation of Arya, who's Soul's original girlfriend or wife or something. I can't remember.
Freddie Mercury used to have a wife too. It's fine.
I know. There's so much. It goes so deep. But yeah, Jacko is in some way, shape, form, or manner Arya, who was Soul Bad Guy's main squeeze back in the day.
I'm assuming the marriage didn't work out because she was too into League of Legends, but
she became Justice, which was the boss character, and then something else happened. I can't remember. There's so many things.
Yeah, everyone's talking about Justice, which looks like a kaiju thing happened.
Yes.
And then everyone's like, all right, time to bring Justice back because we're the bad guys. And then the good guys were like, I hope nobody brings Justice back. And then I didn't watch the end of the story, so I don't know if that happened or not.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly because I tailed off somewhere around there as well.
So Jack, like that's the thing. Like I played like the arcade mode and I did this Soul Bad Guy thing, and it's like, buddy, you're not going to believe who Jacko is. And then it's like, are they going to tell me? Nope. Okay, his story mode's over. What's next?
Yeah, they were teasing it. It's wife.
All right. So, cool thing. Again, it's funny that like it's because I try to like play the tutorial going into this, and the tutorial isn't impenetrable, but like the tutorial's like you're a Soul Bad Guy and Jacko's teaching you how to play the game. And Jacko's like such an insane character to use to teach a person how to play this game, because you're using Jacko's like weird little like minions and hitting them, and it's like I need to engage with a human player, but all right, I'll hit these little guys. And I understand what it's trying to do on like a technical level with hitboxes and like combos and like getting airs things done, but it's like this is the first time in a fighting game where it's like you're not actually fighting a character, you are going to fight in the game.
Yeah, I think it has you like learn how to like super jump by super jumping over a tower of minions or something.
Yeah. It's a very I wouldn't say abstract, but like it's a different approach to teaching somebody how to play a game in a way that they're not going to engage with when it's actually time to hit people. So if I have like one criticism, it's like that maybe didn't set me up for in the best way possible going into the game, because I'm panicking, or like maybe I was just impatient because I didn't get far enough into like this long-ish tutorial setup. This is something I appreciate in this game. You find dog shit. Street Fighter 6 is that its quote unquote story mode is functionally a tutorial on how to do high level play in Street Fighter beyond like the combos, but like giving you a customizable character that you can use different play styles within in order to get a better feel for how the characters play. And I'm not saying Guilty Gear should do that. I'm just saying like my brain engages with tutorializing in a very different way than fighting games expect me to. And I think that's the barrier for me. So
Yeah,
again, this isn't a criticism.
Guilty Gear doesn't have like a casual appeal the way like Street Fighter 6 World Mode is so cool in that regard. Like it just has something that you can use and play with, and it can teach you the game that way. Whereas Guilty Gear is like, get in there and go.
Yeah, Guilty Gear has a very much like, this isn't your first, right? It better not be.
It better not be. But if it's your first, buckle up. You're going to learn.
You got to learn how to do physics before you can run, I guess. But yeah, no. What impact would you say this game made on you?
Let me phrase that by telling you a story from November of last year.
Sure.
I went to a wedding between my friend Amadeus, username, not government name, and my friend Jam, username, not government name. And they met on a Guilty Gear fan site like over a decade ago. And they were dating for ages, and they finally got married. Guilty Gear brought them together. They both do community outreach stuff regards to tournaments, and Amadeus is a artist and a longtime jam player, one of the better jam players out there. And most of the people who were invited to that wedding were the notable players from the Midwestern scene.
Wow.
And they weren't invited just because they're the best players from the Midwest. They were invited because one of the greatest times of your life, being married, the people that were chosen to be a part of that experience were the people that we have battled with and traveled with and gone to tournaments together, and we have formed connections with for decades now, that we wanted to all be there, or they wanted us to all be there for their big day. It is so much about what is outside of the game now. You know, going to this wedding, and most of the wedding, I don't say wedding party, so to speak, not the bridesmaids and grooms, best men's or whatever, but most of the attendees being Guilty Gear players from the Midwest and across the country. It didn't feel like it was a tournament. It felt like it was people who were friends coming together to celebrate something their friend did, because that's what we are. These are the people I've known for so many years of my life now, and they are some of my greatest friends.
That's really wonderful and touching story. And I hope I'm not, let me say it this way. Like, I think, Daisuke's like whole thing about like, I want my work to like change the world in some way. Like I think that would be a really lovely thing, like a lovely legacy to leave, that his work is putting people together in such a way that it is actually creating love in the world. It is a garden that he is cultivated and taken care of, and that like passion put into it is creating connections with other people. Art is this great unifier. It's something that people can share together communally, whether it is like in a concert or going to a movie theater or going to a play, an opera, what have you. And video game tournaments and fighting game tournaments are a new way of expression where people are spectating high level play and engaging and sharing an experience, growing together alongside a video game. And it's a recent phenomena in terms of like what has happened in the world, because it is like a new artistic medium. But I'm so touched to hear like something like this is bringing people together the way that it did, the people that you care about.
And one of the coolest parts of that wedding is that when Jam walked in for the actual ceremony, Holy Order's Be Just or Be Dead played behind her. And it fucking ripped.
That's that rules. I'm thank you for like helping me get into this world a little bit, even if it's just to dip my toe in. I rock with it. I'm glad that this can be so much for so many people. Has it made you like look into the music that Daisuke likes at all, out of curiosity?
Not necessarily, but only because I already kind of thought shred metal was cool back in the 2000s. So I was already like, hell yeah, this guy knows what's going on. I didn't really need to do much of a deeper dive to be like, yeah, Ride the Lightning is Kai Super, and I own that album.
For me, it's a mix of like, yeah, I mean, like that's very mainstream thing to appreciate. But like for him, now Daisuke is a guy who was born in apartheid South Africa. Like he is a Japanese man who was born in Johannesburg and then moved to Japan afterwards. And like, this is a person that has like a deep relationship with Western music. Like Japan is a very westernized country. There's just like this very worldly aspect to all of this. And I think like that kind of like experience with stuff that's so ingrained in like our American Western culture, like affecting somebody differently in a different culture needs to be appreciated as well.
Mm-hmm. It is worldly is the right word for it. I think it touches on so many things. And the nice thing about Guilty Gear is the more you look at it, the more you learn about what it influences it, because it wears its influences on its sleeve, the more you can learn about things outside of Guilty Gear.
Yeah. It's surprising to me on a level that this thing has like an English dub at all, because this is a person whose life has sort of been like meeting music and art on the terms in which it was created. Like he was growing up listening to music, loving music that's in a different language and that he speaks natively. And I think the least we can do is probably meet him halfway and like engage with the stuff that he's made in the preferred language that he would like to experience it in. And I'm not even like a particular dubs versus subs guy, but I'm thinking about that in the context of like this greater work. I don't know. Maybe it's just like a thought that I have that's incomplete, but it's like this is a guy who's like had like his view of the world shaped through art. At least we can do is like meet him at like where his brain is at to understand his side of the world.
Totally, completely agree.
Get up to rock, get up to burst. Tell me to fight on me, the ways to make her. You must have heard it. Grasp the truth, hold it high. Like fish, that's what this makes us start with. You haven't heard it, girl. Don't be afraid to listen to your own heart. Big fat sonic, that's my heart beating you.
Despite how open it is with its influences, there's just something so singular about this. So I wanted to move into the recommendation section. What would you even begin to recommend to somebody, video game or otherwise, TV, film, radio, music, whatever? What would you recommend to those people who like games like Guilty Gear Xrd?
I'm going to recommend that you play the works of Tetsuya Mizuguchi, because I think if you like Guilty Gear, you're going to like creations that have such a vibrant voice of the author in them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think specifically Lumines is going to be able to give you that sensation.
Yeah.
We talked about it at the very beginning, but Mizuguchi as a creator is someone whose voice feels indelible to his works, in not trying to be as auteur as Daisuke is, but it is so hard to remove the influence of Mizuguchi from his works. And I think that is a very important thing that you will find as a commonality between that and Guilty Gear.
It's a good recommendation. And as somebody who played Res for the first time last year, definitely one that I can co-sign. I've been wanting to play Space Channel 5, for example, forever, and I think that would be very in line with the sensibilities of a lot of what Guilty Gear has to say, even if it's a completely different kind of experience.
In many ways, it's a similar type of experience because it's batshit difficult.
Yeah. I would recommend one of the games that you pitched talking about, Jet Set Radio. I do feel like that is like, again, something where music
very much
is so like a part of it. Like that's very important. Do you have any other recommendations?
I'm trying to think of what else could. Not off the top of my head. I've been caught a little bit with my pants down on this one.
No, you're fine. I can give some stuff while you think about it. In terms of video games, Hi-Fi Rush, which was a wonderful 2023 video game that it was like I finally played it for the first time last year, and it's really quite good. It's the producer of it is the guy who directed Resident Evil 4. It's just this really amazing rhythm Devil May Cry type game.
It's kind of hard to describe. It doesn't do well on paper.
It doesn't do well on paper, and it doesn't make an immediately good first impression because the protagonist can be he's very out there, which can like grate on you a little bit. But by the time you get to the halfway point in the game, you're just won over by the sincerity of it all. that even like the more like, okay, this is just a very tropey game in terms of dialogue and whatever. There's just like this genuine passion and design, and the visuals are like doing that kind of thing that Guilty Gear is doing with like being 3D but looking like a cartoon. There's just so much love about it, and the music choices it makes for the licensed music that are used in like the boss battles and in the final level are so immaculate. And so, for the most part, stuff you would never expect to hear in a video game, much less an action video game made by a Japanese dev team, that I just try to recommend it as much as possible because I regret not playing it sooner, even though it had only been out for a year when I got around to it.
Yeah, when the trailer for Hi-Fi Rush came out, and it's like featuring music by, and it said the artists and it said the Prodigy, I would have bet my entire life savings that the song it was going to use was Invaders Must Die, and I knew I was right.
Yeah.
The only other recommendation I would give would be The Bouncer for the PS2.
Oh, yeah. Interesting one.
I think that is another type of interesting artsy, fartsy kind of game with some mechanical oddities and a soundtrack that really ties everything together. Is probably the best way I'd say it.
Yeah. Definitely worth experiencing because it's very singular. Yeah,
Yes.
For both good and bad.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very interesting. With another recommendation I have on an anime level, if you like things that are like vulgar but also artistic, I'd recommend Fooly Cooly. Specifically, that first season that aired like 20-ish years ago. Those later seasons that came out a few years ago aren't anywhere near as good, but it's like a coming of age story about going through puberty and trying to figure things out while also like nonsense is happening in the background the entire time. And the soundtrack by The Pillows, a J-rock band, is just their music alone is worth watching the show for. So I'd recommend that if you really like things like Guilty Gear. It's like 6 episodes long. It won't take much at all to watch it. Also, check out Chainsaw Man. Like Guilty Gear, it is a vulgar series that wears its influences and its heart on its sleeve. Underneath the vulgar surface is a really dark but moving story about struggling to find agency in a violent and exploitative world. It is my favorite manga series and one of my favorite works of the 21st century. I couldn't even begin to tell you how much this series means to me. Please just check it out for yourself. But yeah, and those are the recommendations I have. Anything else before I move on?
No, I'm good.
All right. So that was Guilty Gear Xrd. Jay, it was really wonderful to have you on. Thank you so much for introducing me to this game and talking to me about what it means to you. Before I let you go, please promote the hell out of yourself.
All right. As mentioned at the very beginning, I primarily do YouTube videos, essay topics on a variety of things, but my main squeeze, so to speak, is an exhaustively detailed retrospective on the Final Fantasy series. You can find everything I do at youtube.com/IdolismJ, IDOLISMJ. I write for supercombo.gg periodically. You can find my articles there. That's the website name, supercombo.gg. You can find me on Blue Sky at idolismj.yase, YASE.world. So idolismj.yase.world. And I think that is primarily the things I need to promote.
Well, thank you so much for giving me your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate being here.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for introducing me to Guilty Gear. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of Select and Start. Once again, I am your host, editor, and promoter, Keifer. If you enjoyed this episode, please give the show a positive review wherever you're listening to this. Engagement helps the show, and your feedback will help improve it. If you want to get more engaged, give the show a follow on Twitter and Blue Sky. Links to that in the description. If you have thoughts about Guilty Gear Xrd or any other games we've discussed, send a DM or leave a comment, and I'll gladly read it on the show. You can support the show on Patreon as well. If you pledge at least $1 a month, you'll get early access to new episodes as well as extended episodes with exclusive content and conversations. That's on patreon.com/Keifer's Corner. You can find a link to that and the rest of my projects in the description as well. Select and Start is on the Moonshot Network, which is supported by its own Patreon. Find out more on moonshotpods.com. And the art for the show is made by my best friend, Avery Ott. You can follow him on social media with the handle at AveryRobinOtt. That's AVRY, Robin OTT. The show's theme song was composed by Mike Petrie. You can check out the links in the description for their work, as well as IdolismJ's. All right, I think that's it. Heaven or hell.
Keifer. That's Soul Bad Guy's wife.
That's Soul Bad Guy's wife?
That's yeah.
I thought he was gay.